and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Before we'll start with our action review, and I'm asking the city manager to give us a presentation and introduce the agenda for tonight. We will not have a closed session today. I also wanted to just make a note, we're going to continue doing our roll call voting, and tonight I'll be going in the reverse order that we did from last week. So I'll start with Councilmember Watlington and then go to Mayor Pro Tem, and then we'll just keep going that way as we proceed, as we talked about for our meeting. So with that, I turn it over to our city manager.
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. Tonight, what we have for you is a Safe Charlotte update. However, what we'll focus on, for the most part, is Chief Jennings, who will come in and talk about 2020 as it relates to not only crime, but what the city has been doing in terms of violence and how we've been able to address that. As the mayor said earlier, there is no closed session. So, Mayor, that's the only item that we have on the agenda for tonight.
So if Mr. Jones, if we can, then we have advertised our public forum. So we advertise that at 6 o'clock. So we'll go, if we finish up a little bit early, we'll go to our consent agenda, which is internal except for one item on it. So thank you very much. And I turn it back over to you, Mr. Jones.
So thank you again, Mayor and members of council. At the beginning, I was going to go through a Safe Charlotte update, but I decided not to because my strong desire is most of that is ingrained in what we've been doing over the course of the last 18 months. And so what I will say as it relates to Safe Charlotte, it's not just the item that you approved last fall, but it's also what the city is doing in terms of addressing violence as a public health crisis. But I would add to that there's been great work that's happening in the committees, from great neighborhoods to economic workforce and business development and transportation and planning. So a lot of that rolls up into how we can address violence as a public health crisis. But I learned a lot from the annual strategy meeting that this was top of mind for the council. So we decided to come back tonight with Chief Jennings and an update. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chief Jennings.
Thank you, Mr. Manager, Madam Mayor, members of council. Hopefully everybody can see the slide presentation that we're going to go through. I did recently, last week, I did a year-end crime update to the media, and some of this will be redundant to that, but hopefully you'll get an idea of not just what we saw in 2020, but some of the things, the good work that we've done, as well as some of the things that we're going to be looking at moving forward. So with that, we can start the slides. So an overview of some of the things we're going to look at is population and violent crime comparison over the past 30 years, some of the 2020 crime in review, crime management and corridor focus areas, and then moving forward. So we'll be hitting some of those topics. We go to the next slide. So first, I want to just give an overview of the population and violent crime comparison over the past 30 years. This is something that I normally don't talk about. I really never want to give an excuse of the crime and violent crime in particular going up just because of the population. But I do think it's relevant in this situation to give an overview to kind of see what we've looked at over the past 30 years and that we can get a visual of what we've seen. So if you can go to the next slide. This is just a chart of the population growth through CMPD and what was formerly CPD. So our jurisdiction, you can see the population growth starting from 1990, which was right around 400,000, which is the jurisdiction that we served. And it's up close to 1 million at this point in 2020. We can go to the next slide. And the relevancy here is the violent crime rate, which is not talked about that often. So the violent crime rate is based on per 100,000 residents in our jurisdiction. And if you look at the 1990, that actual number is 2,302 violent crimes per 100,000 residents. And if you shift all the way over to 2020, last year we ended at 848 violent crimes per capita per 100,000 residents. So wanted to just kind of throw that out because I do think it is significant when we look at over the past 30 years how the crime rate has steadily been on the decline based on what we saw back in the 90s. Next slide. So we'll go over some of the crime in review. Next is what is going to be what I reported out last week to the media. And if you'll go to the next slide. So if you look, we had 4,000, looking at the arrest, well, I'll start with the interactions, 514,000 police interactions with the public in 2020. And that is actually down 14% from what we've, generally we average about 600,000 with COVID and everything last year. I think it did affect that, but some of the significant numbers is the number of arrests, 14,568 arrests that you see on there, which is down 17%. However, what our focus has been and tried to be is on violent crime. If you look at the violent crime numbers of 3,050 arrests, that's actually up 3%. So total arrests may be down, but violent crime arrests, which is our focus, has been up. And guns off the streets, you also look at that as that's a very large number, 2,265 guns that we've confiscated off the streets. That's up 9% from the previous year, which is pretty significant. And I'm not going to go through all the numbers down below, but if you look at some of the ones that jump out, in particular, I know everyone's aware of the homicides, that it's up 18%. Violent crime is up 16%. Aggravated assaults, which is another concern that we've been dealing with, is up 29%. You can also look at some of those crimes that are down that can be attributed to COVID because it does take away opportunity with more people being home. In particular, the burglaries, that's down 31% that you see there. Property crimes in general as a whole was down 14%. So those numbers are pretty significant. If you look at those, if you can go to the next slide. So each division is granted all 13 patrol divisions have a dedicated crime reduction unit. And these are specialty units that each division can use to utilize anywhere they want as far as in their division to deal with certain particular crime trends. In the past, those crime trends could be anywhere from larceny from autos to house break-ins to violent crimes. What we've done, what they focused on over the past in 2020, for the majority of 2020, is to put that focus more on addressing violent crimes. And you'll see some of the numbers. I didn't break it down into each division, but the 13 divisions collectively, they've recovered about 467 illegal guns off the streets that have been taken out of the streets in the community, and they've made over 1,600 arrests just through those units from the the CRUs within the divisions. So if you can go to the next slide. And I think I'd be remiss not to mention the great work and the great response from the community. Although we were dealing with COVID, we had some historical numbers with Crime Stoppers, 3,220 tips that were received that resulted in 162 arrests and cleared 330 cases. So also recovered 45 guns, which I think is significant. But that's a big plus for us within the department, that whenever we can get tips that come in to help us to either verify some of the leads that we have or to even develop leads themselves, and to see that those actually result in the solving of some of our cases is very significant for us in and very appreciative of the community for stepping up through Crime Stoppers. And I will note real quick, one thing about Crime Stoppers, although we offer monetary rewards for Crime Stopper tips that lead to arrest, there are often times when people have no interest in the money itself. They just want to make sure that they're providing the information. So we've had tips that have warranted rewards that have never been picked up. So I think that says a lot for our community who steps up to the plate. So if we can go to the next slide. And without going through the numbers, you look at the homicide clearance rate at the top. Right now, we're sitting at 71% for 2020. The national average is around 60% and a little bit higher than 60%. So our homicide detectives have regularly stayed well above the national average. And what you see with that number of 75 or 71% will actually change as we are able to solve cases from 2020. As we go into 2021, we're still working several cases in 2020 that will be solved, and that number will go up, much like you see the numbers in 2010, 2014, up in the 80% percentage rate of clearances. I wouldn't be surprised if we don't get close to, if not above 80% for 2020 when it's all said and done, but we still have some work to do there. Homicide by primary circumstances, you can read that below. The one thing that I've been saying regularly is you look at the number of arguments that we've been able to identify that the homicide resulted from an argument. That number is at 21, and I've been saying for a very long time people are too quick to get into what's minor disputes that are arguments that turn into the use of deadly force against each other, and that's disturbing. If you look at the number of other, basically other is just they don't fit into that category. It could be unknown what the reasoning is. It could be certain situations that don't involve drugs or domestic cases or robberies or anything like that. So we list them as other, and we are down. I say down, homicides are up, but however, we had reached the point of 123 homicides. However, as those come off as justifiable by the district attorney's office, those numbers will go down. So I suspect that number of 120 will also go down as the district attorney is able to review some more of those cases. All right, so we can go to the next slide, please. And if we look at how we break down our homicides, the one thing that disturbs me on this is the rise that we saw from 2019 to 2020. The victims by age is 14 to 17. In 2019, we had 5. 2020, there were 13 victims between the ages of 14 and 17, and there were 3 victims under the age of 14. So if you want to also look at going down to the victims by race, out of 120 homicides, 95 of those victims were Black, and suspects by race, 97 of those were Black. And you can see if you go down the list, Hispanics being 15 for the victims, and Hispanic suspects were 5. So there's certainly some disproportionality there as related to our population as well. So those are some numbers that kind of jump out at you when you look at how we break down the homicides based on victims and suspects. All right, if we can go to the next slide, please. So we'll start talking a little bit about crime management. If we can hit the next slide. One thing that I'm particularly proud of is our use of the Real-Time Crime Center and the technology that we have within CMPD. So we have a great deal of technology, whether it's cameras, tag readers, different things that we use to help solve crimes, and the Real-Time Crime Center is what brings all of that together, and to be able to do that in real time right when the cases are occurring. So they assisted in over 2,400 investigations last year. Over 14, almost 1,500 of those were violent crimes that they were working with. And this is right when those crimes are occurring, whether it's a robbery or shooting or something like that, that they're right there on it, checking the cameras and all of the systems that we have. 254 of those violent cases were cleared on the initial investigation, which means that we were able to catch the suspects right away or identify a suspect right away. And 205 of those suspects were arrested from cases that the Real-Time Crime Center was involved in. So that's pretty significant work. And then there's just a little extra down there about the stolen vehicles, 359 stolen cars that they were able to recover, as well as 24 missing persons that they assisted, cases that they were assisting with. All right, next slide. So the National Integrated Ballistic Information Network, which in short is NIBIN, because that's a mouthful, so I'll refer to that as NIBIN, that we have always been part of NIBIN. It's a pretty significant national database that we use for firearm casing, bullets, shell casings, and to be able to link certain cases based on the firearms that were used in those cases. We had a great deal of those firearms that were either needed test firing or the casings needed to be entered into NIBIN that we saw last year that it was taking months to get those cases compared to each other and to be able to have those linked together. So we did a really big push to get some additional people to help us catch up with that, and then also help us to keep caught up. So what turned into what used to be months to be able to help resolve these cases and link these cases is now in days, and with priorities we can actually even do quicker than that. So if you look at the results of that at the bottom, 557 investigative leads were generated through NIBIN last year, and 517 of those leads involved casings from shooting in the occupied dwellings, which is the next topic that I'll go into. So if you look at the shooting in the occupied dwelling cases, these are very disturbing cases because these involve people that are shooting randomly into houses or vehicles with total disregard on what they're going to hit inside and not knowing who's inside. So the Shooting in Occupied Dwelling Task Force was able to complete a full year in 2020 of being in operation. They do some very good work. And the reason we even one of the reasons we did establish that task force is you saw last year in 2020 we had a 47% increase in shooting in occupied dwellings, homes and vehicles. That's 927 incidents. That's far too many. But they were able to take on and obtain 164 arrests. And another significant number is the 118 firearms that they seized, with 29 of them being stolen. All right, so next slide. So I'll go over this real quick with our Organized Crime Task Force. We are in partnership with the U.S. Secret Service. We have detectives that work with them. Another angle at this is that those people that are involved in violent crime also are involved in other crimes, such as some of these crimes that you see, such as identity thefts and some investigations, financing drug operations with auto and personal loan fraud, things like that. So we had 3 violent career criminals arrested and indicted for the use of stolen identities last year. But this Organized Crime Task Force resulted in 21 arrests, and those including 13 federal indictments, which is always a plus when we can throw federal indictments in and get some of the dangerous people off the streets as well using that resource. So with that, I'll go to the next slide. Nuisance abatement. I've talked to many of you on council in reference to nuisance abatement. We do know the process, and we've gone through that and what the process takes, but Our NEST team, Nuisance Enforcement Strategy team, is going to continue to work hard to leverage those owners. We currently have 30 that are somewhere in the process. We don't have any that are currently within the that have been within the attorneys as far as the takeovers there, but we do have 30 that we're working on right now that we think are going to hold us some pretty good results down the road. All right. The next slide. So our Safe Streets Task Force is a partnership that we have with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Their Safe Streets Task Force, CMPD, is federal charges working with the FBI on more than 14 suspects in 2020. Those charges, if you look, include a lot of drug trafficking and felony, firearm by felon charges. So they've been able to get 19 illegal guns, and a flamethrower of all things were recovered in 2020 by that task force. They also have been able to confiscate over $300,000 worth of illegal street narcotics in 2020. So if we go to the next slide. So CMPD's Human Trafficking Task Force has been doing some great work last year with the charge of 11 suspects. And all of those suspects are currently awaiting a federal trial right now. But the most important thing is there have been 14 victims of human trafficking that's been diverted, and all of those were children. So if we just save one child, that's a win for us. But 14 is something that we're very proud of, but we still would like to save more because we know there are more out there, and we're going to work hard on that. So next slide. So CoreStat, we were able to hold our first CoreStat, and I'll explain what that is, a couple of weeks ago with a couple of our divisions already. So just to give you a little explanation of what that involves is our division captains and their majors and lieutenants, we require them to report basically their state of the union to us as command on as far as what they're doing, what their divisions are looking like crime-wise, much like I'm doing with you now, but they're to be specific about their divisions and what they're doing, how they're addressing those crimes. So what we wanted to do was to pull the community into those and let them, one, to be able to see the process of how we hold those divisions accountable, and also to let them have input on how they want to police. It all goes part of my core 4 with community collaboration, that the community is going to have some input on how they are to be policed. So when we talk about the crime issues and the issues in the division, this allows those community leaders to come in and be able to tell us what they're seeing and what their issues are. And then they also hold us accountable on how do we, whether we're doing what we're doing. And this is just going to grow. We had to do it virtually because of COVID, but down the road, this is going to get much bigger, and the community will be able to come in and speak with our command of those divisions. So next slide. Okay, corridor focus areas. I will go through quickly with this. If you go to the next slide, please. And so the corridors of opportunity, we just wanted to list those and kind of go through a few things of what we're looking at in those corridors. You go to the next slide. So we wanted to take just a broad look at what we've done in those corridors in 2020. And if we go back and look at some of the work, not just what our crime reduction units have done, but just holistically throughout our department and their focus in those areas, they've been able to make more than 1,700 arrests. And the most interesting thing that I want to throw out is officers conducted more than 2,000 traffic stops and wrote roughly 300 citations, but they also issued more than 1,000 verbal warnings, which is what I envision is as far as when we start making traffic stops, it doesn't always have to end in a citation. It doesn't always have to end in an arrest, but verbal warnings can be just as effective, if not more, at certain times when you're dealing with these fragile areas. So we are able to utilize our federal JAG grant overtime in these areas, which allows us to get officers out there to do more non-traditional patrols, such as the walking beats, the bike patrols, and things that we're going to do outside of the regular just riding through in a police car and answering calls for service. So JAG grant overtime allows the officer to make overtime in those areas, but it's also beneficial to the community because we are able to put more resources out there on top of what our regular staffing is. And so continuing in those corridors to partner with local business leaders, our crime prevention, crisis response team, and mental health groups, we're helping, using some of that also to help with homelessness and manage some of the mental health challenges that we have as well. So next slide. So moving forward, 2021, you go to the next slide, please. So we have outlined, and everyone has heard, I'm sure, my core four strategic priorities: community collaboration, crime management, professional accountability, and employee wellness. And part of what we did as a team is looked at our mission and vision statement. And surprisingly, it was last updated in 1994. I don't think anyone would disagree that policing has changed a great deal since 1994. We thought that our mission and vision statement, it was well overdue. So we were able to change that and hopefully have that more reflective on what we're trying to achieve in 2020 and 2021. So that's been changed. If you want to go to the next slide, please. So moving forward, we have teams currently in place that I wanted to put together a comprehensive, robust violent crime reduction strategy. They've already started that work, and one of their three focused areas that they want to focus on, that we're going to be putting forward: priority locations, priority offenders, and priority partnerships. And the work that they're doing, they feel if they can focus on those three areas, then we can be successful in our mission to reduce violent crime for 2021. So next slide, please. And lastly, this will be we're going to continue to use data and technology to improve what we do, realign some of our specialty units. We're currently still looking at different areas within our agency that we can change up, that we can put more focus on violent crime and take some, where we can take some from some areas and move to others and focus more on violent crime. Reorganization of the department. As you know, we're looking at civilianization of several roles in our department, which will allow us to reallocate some of those resources as well. And then also finding more opportunities to collaborate with partners within the criminal justice system. I think we have a very good relationship with our state and federal partners, as well as with our district attorney and some of the work that we've done with our magistrates. One of the things that we've done also is the offender accountability form, which we've talked about before, which allows us to, for just in brief, we can tell the DA, we can tell the magistrate and the DA and on up, basically what we know about this offender. If it's an offender that we know has a pretty significant history or has been preying on our citizens in a certain community, that information is included in the offender accountability form, and so the DA is able to have access to that as well as the magistrate. So next slide, please. I think that's it. And I do have Deputy Chief Stella Patterson as well as Deputy Chief Kurt Voorhees with me if there are any questions that I may not be able to answer for you, but I'll be glad to entertain those at this time. So.
All right. I think the first question that we have is from Councilmember Watlington.
Sure. I've got quite a few questions, Madam Mayor, per usual. I'm sure
The
that's
first
not a
person I
surprise.
would recognize is Councilmember Watlington.
Okay, first of all, thank you for the update, Chief Jennings. I know that you are, as you're settling, you've been in your role quite some time now, and there's been quite a bit happening since then, so I'm sure you're moving or you're running with all cylinders. So thank you for the work that you're doing. Quite a bit of questions, as I said, and I'll just start from the beginning. I've got some straight from this presentation, and then I've got a couple from our review of the homicide and violent crime metrics that you sent last week. So firstly, if we can go back to the beginning of the slides, the crime rate, you talked about the crime rate declining. I just want to make sure I understood the graphic. You had your trend line.
Yes. So that's the one you're referring to. Yes.
Okay, and this is specifically to violent crime. That's what I wanted to make sure I understood. This is not overall crime. The actual violent crime rate is reducing. Well,
That's correct. It's specific to violent crime, yes.
okay, and then on slide 7, total arrests. Right here, how does one interpret that number? Is total arrest is 14,000. But how do we interpret that in terms of how often people were arrested once a crime was committed? Like, is that 5% of all crime that resulted in an arrest, or is that 95% of all crime resulted in an arrest? I just want to make sure I understand.
Well, see, that's difficult to measure because some of those arrests could be something as simple as a driving offense. If someone's license is revoked, or if there's a DWI or something. So I can't relate that to, say, we've had, related to how many, I can tell you how many burglary arrests we've had or how many robbery arrests we've had, but I can't relate that to how that relates to crime in general, because some of those are not necessarily criminal offenses per se, as far as Part 1 offenses are concerned.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I think I heard, in general, we don't know, but you said something that I want to make sure I understand. Are people getting arrested for things that are not criminal offenses?
Well, if someone's arrested for driving while impaired, that would be included in that number. Okay. So I think what you're asking was how many of those arrests can be attributed to the actual Part 1 offenses, which I wouldn't be able to do that, but I can tell you, I would be able to get you numbers specifically if you wanted to know how many arrests related to homicides or how many arrests related to robberies. In reference to Part 1 offenses in general, I would have that number, yes.
Okay. If you could provide that later on, certainly don't need it right this moment, but that would just give me an understanding. Also on this page, violent crime, when you've got these violent crime arrests here, you've got everything really looked like, but rate in terms of violent crimes had gone up. Is this up, and is this the crime rate has gone up, or just the number of incidences has gone up?
You're looking at the number of incidents. So when you say, we look at property crime, for example, in whole is down 14%, was down 14% in 2020. Homicides were up 18% in 2020. So those are incidents themselves.
Okay, so when we look at it versus population, the rate itself may actually still be going down, correct?
That's correct. If you look at, so when we tend to always, we talk about the numbers specifically, but we rarely talk about, you never hear about the crime rate because, and that's, I've purposely done that because I've always said that just because our population grows doesn't mean our crime needs to grow. So, but I did want to provide that slide just to give a perspective to council and the public, just kind of see that our crime rate over the past 30 years has continued to decline.
Okay, thank you. On slide 8, you talked a little bit about your crime reduction units. And later on, you on slide 8.
That's the next slide, please.
Okay, while we're waiting,
There we go. Yes.
You talked a little bit about these, and then later on, you talked about your strategic plan going to be focused partly on strategic partnerships. So I wanted to know, on these CRUs, can you name who the current partners are? Really specifically, what I want to know is if our CJAG partners are here, and are our ABC law enforcement officers a part of this partnership as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And, our crime reduction units are division specific. We are, and we've always, matter of fact, I actually took, as far as CJAG is concerned, that I took that role over personally just to be able to get more involved in our CJAG. But when I talk about partnerships, I mean with our federal partners, with the district attorney's office, and I think those are really with the sheriff's office. All of that is moving along really well. I think our working relationship and our constant contact that we have with each other is going to benefit the entire county when we start talking about how do we work together to make sure that we're doing, one, that we're targeting the right locations and people that's going to be most effective in being able to handle some of the caseload, particularly like what we're dealing with the district attorney's office. So all of that partnership is going to help us work together and know where our mission and our roles need to be within the communities.
And as you all do that work, is there anything that you know you need right now to strengthen the impact of CJAG?
CJAG, I'm still, and I've had the conversation with the city manager as well as some of you all. As I get into this more and become better acquainted with the members of CJAG, I'm sure I will be coming forth with any recommendations or things that we can do better. But I've only, especially with COVID, we've only had a couple of meetings since I've been participating in that. But we will continue to move forward and grow there. So.
Okay. On slide 10, where you had highlighted the various circumstances of homicides, I just want to understand a couple of things here. The first one is where I see domestic violence here, the numbers from 2020, you've got 16 homicides attributed to domestic violence. I noticed in the information we got last week, it had 5. Can you talk to me a little bit about what's included in this number versus last week's number? Or if you can't talk specifically to last week's number, can you just tell me what's included here?
Yeah, I didn't see the 5. However, I can't tell you, it could be a difference in, when you talk about intimate partner relationships, that's a different part of domestic violence. So domestic violence could be brother on brother or a son on father or something to that effect. Intimate partner is when someone's in a specific relationship. So I don't have that number, but I can almost guess that it would be the difference in domestic partner when you're talking about a relationship, intimate relationship, as opposed to brother or sister or siblings or things like that. So. Okay.
And as a follow-up to that, and this question is not for the chief, it may even be counsel, but I'd like to understand going forward. I know we've been having conversations regarding this Family Justice Center, and I know that you guys are focused on a pilot right now, and I'm interested to see how that turns out. Is this Family Justice Center focused on all domestic violence or particularly intimate partner violence? And I'm not sure if anybody's got that answer right now. I know it's in the very early stages, but I'd be interested to know.
Why don't we get the manager to respond to that, because I think he's planning a presentation and it's coming up, and maybe that would be a time to discuss the answer to that when the discussion is going on about the Justice Center. So instead of asking him, I think it's planned for February the 1st.
Okay, correct. I can wait for that. The next one on this slide is where we see gang involvement and we see drugs. Can you tell me a little bit about what I would expect that more of the drugs would be intertwined with the gang involvement? Can you help me interpret those two numbers?
Yeah, not necessarily. They're not necessarily intertwined. So gang involvement is interesting because when we determined that the cause of a homicide was because of gang involvement, that's where we list it as 2. That doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have a gang member who might have been involved in a homicide, but that was more particularly could be because of their lifestyle, not necessarily because of 2 gangs that are feuding with each other. And then drug involvement basically we determine it's a drug deal, and we see a lot of them dealing with marijuana sales, that someone is set up to do a drug deal, then they attempt to, they get in some sort of dispute over that drug deal, and then it ends up in a homicide. So when we're able to determine that the homicide is based on drugs, then that's when we list it in that category.
Okay, so that being said, as I think about our Cure Violence investment, can you, and it may not be you, it might be you, Mr. Manager, can someone help me understand what crimes we expect Cure Violence to be able to mitigate? Because my understanding was retaliatory gang violence, but I see that this number is relatively low, but I don't want to assume that that means that we are over-invested in this space.
So, thank you, Ms. Watlington. Again, so we start to think about Safe Charlotte and what we're doing in terms of violence as a public health crisis. Cure Violence is just one tiny piece of it, and that one tiny piece addresses homicides and shootings. So that's the core of Cure Violence, but again, one small piece of a bigger plan.
Okay.
And the measures would be reductions in homicides and reductions in shootings.
Okay. And so as we dig into that, I understand that the measure is homicides, but I don't expect that Cure Violence is addressing all of these primary circumstances. So I just want to make sure that as we're following those numbers, we understand what impact we should actually expect from Cure Violence if they're focused on retaliatory gang violence. The next one on slide 11, I know we've got youth programs. We covered them early on in our reimagining policing work, but I noticed that from a suspect standpoint, that by age, we've got much larger numbers in the 18 to 34 range. What are we doing from a CMPD perspective to address these particular age ranges?
Yeah, so a lot of things, and I'll kind of tell you what we're looking at particular is an adult diversion program, but not necessarily homicides would not fit into that. But we would hope that we are able, just like our youth diversion programs, that we can get someone back on the right track so it doesn't get to this point. And as a matter of fact, we're making really good progress on that. Found some, there's actually some private funding that's going to help us move forward with that, and to have an adult diversion. However, I think even more important, and I know that talking with our sheriff, there's some work that's being done is when an offender gets released from jail, what is their next steps? Because a lot of times when we deal with homicide suspects, that's obviously not the first time that they've been involved in the criminal justice system. So it's important to look at what resources are provided once they get out of jail. I don't particularly think that lands with CMPD, but I do know that the sheriff is I've had some discussions with him with programs that might be able to assist in that.
Mm-hmm. In addition to that, taking it a step further, I'd love to understand in one of our upcoming economic development discussions how we are marrying this up to our workforce development piece. So, Mr. Manager, I don't know if you got anything on that right now, but I'd love to see that. Okay, cool.
Right.
Slide 13. Do we have any more detailed info regarding circumstances of violent crime that's not homicide? When we think about, for instance, rape, do we have an understanding of those numbers? Is that statutory rape? Is it date rape? Are those abductions? As we think about how to go about mitigating those kinds of circumstances, where do we really understand with granularity what those issues are?
We do have breakdown in victim ages, when you talk about statutory rape, suspect ages, things like that. Those are not included in the overall numbers that we look at when we report for UCR numbers. However, that is something I'm pretty sure we can get for you rather quickly when you start breaking it down by victim ages and suspect ages, things like that, so.
Okay. I'm not sure what slide it was on, but you talked about the nuisance abatement and the work with Nest. There's 30 cases open. I'd like to see an update from the city attorney's office of where we are in regards to each of those cases. And in general, I would like to see more of a housing and neighborhood services connection. I sat on a call last week with some of my neighbors out in McDowell Farms, and they are actually experiencing gunshots that they're hearing that's actually coming from across the Greenway in the Springfield community. And I know that we have been working with code enforcement and housing and neighborhood services to try to strengthen their housing or their neighborhood organization. I would love to delve deeper into what we're doing from a housing and neighborhood services standpoint that also drives crime reduction. I see the city manager nodding, so I know you've got that one for me. Also, when we are looking at the crime reduction units, I would love to see the strategy and the plans that are coming out of the CRU, specifically from the Metro, Westover, Steel Creek, Freedom, and North Tryon divisions. As I think about the ones that are really focused on our corridors of opportunity, I would like to have more detail in regards to their work. And then I believe, finally, well, two more things. When we think about, one of the things I want to bring up that I heard from one of our community officers in a recent neighborhood meeting was that since COVID and since the 10 p.m. closures of alcohol outlets, they've seen a drastic reduction in violent crime in their neighborhood, particularly in Parkview neighborhood at 2700 Tuckasegee, which we know we had at least one homicide last year. I'd like to understand, what are we doing to reapply any learnings that we're getting from this COVID season where we've seen some components of violent crime come down? Because we know, and I've shared previously, CFPD has done a data analysis to understand what are some of the factors that correlate very highly with violent crime in our city. And I'd like to see how the CRU is using that information to do very targeted mitigation plans with our alcohol outlet business owners as well. And then finally, as we think about how we manage this going forward, I know it sounds like you all are looking at this on even a weekly level. I'd love to see an update of our metrics and how we're trending in each state community's meeting, if that would be possible.
Thank you, Ms. Watlington. I'd like to recognize the Mayor Pro Tem. Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you. I'm going to pass. I'll yield time to other people. I think we need to move on. But I just want to say, Chief, thank you for all this detailed information. I really appreciate it. And I will just email you separately if I have some questions about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Ajmira, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Chief, great job on this presentation. I just have a very brief question. I know in our safety committee, we have talked about crime intervention model, and I know that's something we are looking at. How do you see that working with the existing tools that you have to fight the violent crime? I know other cities have had success with the crime intervention model, and I'm hoping that it will have similar results here in our Queen City. So I'm interested in hearing your thoughts.
Yeah, well, I think it's something that we have to look at more than just after crime happens and what do we do about it after it occurs. So when we start looking at the basically the roots of why these are occurring, and we start hitting the hitting the bottom line when you start referring to what's causing the crime in the first place, then if we can intervene in an earlier stage so that we never get to that point, I think that's the most effective way to do it. I also have a strong belief that it can't always lie on the police to be able to have to be the ones to do it. We've seen a lot, particularly when we've worked with the Safe Communities Committee and some of the work that we've done last year, that we tend to get stretched too thin. And so when we start to really branch out and trying to do things, then we start losing resources to focus on some of the things we need to be focusing on. So when we start talking intervention, the intervention needs to be really early in the process. So I'm really excited to see what we're talking about in the corridors of opportunity and the violence interrupter programs that we've been discussing since last year.
All right. So is there any other council member to be recognized? Councilmember Winston?
How you doing, Chief Jennings? Happy New Year.
Thank you. Thank you.
How many guns have we put back on the street? And just for clarification to the public, state law makes it so that the city or CMPD cannot destroy firearms that we take off the street. We have to actually put them back in the market eventually. So this is not a CMPD decision, but I think it's a relevant fact that we should know.
Short answer is zero. We have guns stored, but we have not sold any back to the vendors.
How long can we keep that up with and still be compliant with the law?
Well, the law doesn't particularly, and I'd have to really get more information, but the law doesn't particularly say when you have to do that. But I can't destroy them based on what the law says. So rather than to put them back on the streets, we have been able to store them and we had to be creative on how we store them, but we are storing them in our facility here. So I would like to see some work on some legislation to change that, and I'm going to be able to. I've talked to many of my partners across the state, chiefs that are willing to get into that with me, and that's an effort that I think is going to be worthy of doing rather than selling guns to vendors to put back on the streets.
Well, I think that's definitely somewhere you and I can find some common ground. I'd love to explore that in an intergovernmental committee to see if there isn't a legislative solution that this council can get behind moving forward. My last question is, what would you say is the largest source of violence in our community looking back to 2020 as well as looking forward to 2021?
That's difficult to say. You say the largest source, you talk about like as in drug related or arguments, things like that. Is that what you mean?
Well, I guess, I think our job on council is to try to find policy solutions to the biggest, to have the largest impact. And I believe that, whether it's, economic development, community safety, or stormwater mitigation, the best and highest use of our tax dollars from a city perspective is attacking the source. So it would help us, I think, to understand, where the greatest source of violence is.
No, I absolutely appreciate. Thank you, Councilman. I do appreciate that question because the bottom line is there are bad people out there. That we have violent people that are continuously preying on our public, our citizens. So I think our focus, and one of the things I've spoken with the district attorney about, is we have to be intentional about who we focus on, that we want are the right people getting prosecuted and put in jail. And we have to be intentional about that because, as you've heard the saying a lot that 10% of the people make up the majority of some of our issues when it comes to criminal activity. So how do we identify those people and how do we make sure that they're prosecuted fully? And that's one of the things that myself and the sheriff's office and the district attorney's office in magistrate's office, we're all going to hopefully work together to be able to put a dent in that. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
All right. Are there any other council members that would have a question?
Madam Mayor, I have my hand up.
Mr. Driggs?
So Chief, I have a number of questions that I'll send you in writing because we're basically out of time. But I did want to raise the subject of the courts. And we have had a long history of talking about the bottlenecks that are created by the courts and the impact that has on law enforcement. There was one topic in particular having to do with releasing violent criminals with ankle bracelets. So COVID, I think, has made the situation worse. But could you talk generally about how the capacity of the courts is affecting your ability to do your job?
Yeah, and that's very difficult because I know that the district attorney, in my conversations with him, he's in a very peculiar situation, a very tough spot. However, when we created the electronic monitoring program, I think we've kind of gone beyond the scope of what it was intentionally intended for, and so we do have the right, I say, to refuse someone to be put on electronic monitoring. So that's always in there. We do have a capacity, a number that we cannot exceed because we just don't have, one, the funding to do it, and two, we don't have the manpower to help manage that many people on electronic monitoring. So what I'll tell you is that we're close to that number. And once we start getting there, we have to be strategic on who comes off and who goes on. So we want to make sure we're getting the right people on electronic monitoring just as much as we are when we talk about getting the right people to stay in jail. So.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Is there anyone else that would like to be recognized? I want you to know I'm working, not in the building today, so just wanted to, if I missed you, it's just that Ms. Jackson and I aren't syncing up very well sometimes, so. Okay. Chief Jennings?
Yes, ma'am.
I want to say thank you on behalf of what your entire department is doing and working towards the restructuring, the strategic efforts. I am very, very interested in how we, I think, allow this idea of cure violence where they have a metric and then you have a metric, but I wonder if it's where the place is and the neighborhood improvements, how do we get that so that that's included as well? Because I think having that presence, they have been clear to say that they want to see the reduction in gun use and homicides. And then how do we look at that from the neighborhood that they're assigned to work with, which is Beattysport and LaSalle for right now, as we start out on this palette. So I'm looking forward to that connection with that, is it crime reduction unit in that corridor, and a model perhaps of what works and what doesn't work for the remaining corridors as we begin to approach those areas as well. So with that, is there anyone else? Hearing no one else, Mr. Jones, we have time? I apologize. I did not ask about the council consent questions and answers. If there were any from Ms. Harris, I did not see one by email. So, Mr. Jones?
She's coming up now,
There you
Mayor.
go. Sorry, Ms. Harris, and I didn't get a chance to ask those additional questions, but let me just do, on the consent items, we have one speaker on item 24, which is the CATS mobile ticketing app, and then we have some staff deferrals that I have from the clerk's office. All of these are being deferred until February the 22nd. Item number 45, 49, 52, and 62. And I guess, was there any item on the consent agenda that anyone would like for a separate vote? And do I see Mr. Newton? No? Okay.
Madam Mayor, this is.
Yes, Ms. Ajmira?
Yes, Could you please pull consent item number 24?
Yes, we have that when we have a speaker there, so it's already going to be voted on separately.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would have an item that needs to be voted on separately?
Yes, ma'am. Madam Mayor, Mr. Winston has asked for 21 Governor's Highway Safety Program grant for traffic safety driving while impaired task force to be pulled
Okay.
for a separate vote, as well as 22 Governor's Highway Safety Program grant for traffic safety law enforcement liaison. So
Okay.
that's 21, 22, 23 police vehicles.
All right,
And also, you've already mentioned 24, and then also number 26, on-call fencing installation and repair services.
26. So everyone heard Ms. Harris, separate votes, 21, 22, 23, 24, 26.
Yes, ma'am.
Deferrals, 45, 49, 52, 62.
Madam Mayor.
Yes,
This is
ma'am, Ms.
Stephanie.
Kelly.
Item 62 has been settled and it's not being deferred. I got
Thank you for the
clarification this
correction.
afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Are there any other questions regarding consent items that we might address? Ms. Harris, did you have any called in?
No, ma'am.
Okay. All right.
Madam Mayor,
Yes, sir, Mr. Bakari?
since we have a speaker and it's already a separate vote for 24,
Yes.
do we need to say we might have a comment? I kind of want to hear what the speaker says and where that evolves, but I'm not positive yet, so.
No, you don't have to. It will be separate, no matter, a separate vote as well as the speaker at the
Got it.
same
Thank
time.
you.
Okay?
Madam Mayor?
Who was that?
Watlington.
Ms. Watlington? Yes.
Yep. On item 40, I just had a question on that
I
one.
couldn't hear which item.
Item 40,
Okay? Item 40 on Wilkerson Boulevard property transaction.
I just wanted to understand, I read it as aviation property transactions, and so I'm assuming this came from the airport? I just want
I would
to
assume
understand what the
the same
intention
thing.
was. Yeah, I just want to understand what the intention was with this.
We have Haley Gentry. Wendy, if you can, Haley Gentry can answer that. Is it available on the
So you mean,
WebEx.
what are they going to do with the property?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so, Ms. Harris, can you get that response?
Yes.
Okay. It looks like the project is called the North End Around Taxiway, but I don't know specifically what that means in terms of it's a right-of-way for it, paving, it's going to be paved over for the taxiway, but the project is North End Around Taxiway. So we'll have to get more detail. Okay.
Madam Mayor,
Yes, ma'am, Ms.
I'm sorry, this is Ms. Johnson. Can I get some information regarding item number 53?
Yes, of course. Item
Okay.
53, which
Yes.
is the streetscape on McCullough Drive, and so we will get some information to you on the streetscape project.
Okay, thank you.
All right? Anybody else got a capital improvement project going on in their district? We're gonna have to start doing project descriptions out for everybody.
That would be
by
perfect.
district. You can tell what year it is, guys. You can definitely tell what year it is. So, okay. With that, we'll get back. Let me just ask Ms. Johnson and Ms. Watlington, Ms. Harris can get that to you later. All right, thank you very much. So it is now 6:08, so I think we can go, we don't have the closed session, so why don't we will go to the separate vote. Well, first of all, let's do this. We'll do the consent items before we go to our regular meeting, because we do have an awards and proclamation, and we'll do the consent items that we can approve as a unanimous, in one motion, and then we'll be ready to go to the awards and recognitions and then the public forum. So may I have a motion for items 21 through 69 with the following exceptions? Deferred 45, 49, 52, settled 62. The following items would be excluded as well.
a separate vote on 21, 22, 23, 24, and 26.
So moved.
Second,
I'm trying to figure out
Isel.
who made that motion.
Driggs.
Mr. Driggs, and who made the second?
Isel.
All right, Ms. Islip. So, all right, we'll begin the motion with Ms. Watlington,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem,
yes.
Ms. Hajmira,
Yes.
Mr. Winston,
Yes.
Mr. Bakari,
Yes.
Mr. Driggs,
Yes.
Mr. Eggleston,
Yes.
Mr. Graham,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Newton.
Yes.
That passes unanimously. All right. I want to go ahead and do our awards and recognitions prior to our public hearing that would start at 10. Well, why don't we go ahead and try to finish the consent agenda? We have a separate vote, so let's go with a separate vote on item 21 for the Governor's Highway Safety Program, Grant for Traffic Safety, Driving While Impaired Task Force. Who wanted to address this item? Was it Mr. Winston?
I just want separate votes on it.
Oh, so you don't have any comments on any of the four?
No, ma'am.
Okay, well, we'll just do separate votes on each of those. You have to tell me, because this roll call thing is not an easy thing. I've got so much paper to follow up on these, so let me find this blank sheet for these kinds of motions, okay? All right, so we will have a vote on item 21, the Governor's Highway Safety Program Grant for Traffic Safety Driving While Impaired. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Isel.
Second?
Eggleston.
Eggleston? Ms. Watlington, any discussion? Ms. Watlington?
Yes.
Ms. Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes.
Ms. Hajmira?
Yes.
Mr. Winston?
No. No.
Mr. Bakari?
Yes.
Mr. Driggs?
Yes.
Mr. Eggleston?
Yes.
Mr. Graham?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Newton?
Yes.
The next item is item 22, the Governor's Highway Safety Program Grant for Traffic Safety Law Enforcement Liaison. Could I have a motion for adoption?
To approve, Eggleston.
A
Second,
second?
Driggs.
All right, any discussion? Hearing no discussion, Ms.
Madam Mayor,
Watlington?
I did want to hear what Councilmember Winston's perspective was on this and why he pulled it out.
Councilmember Winston, do you have a perspective to share?
Yes, again, as we try to transition away from a law enforcement perspective for solutions of creating community safety, we actually have to do that at some point in time. So, for instance, when we're dealing with, I do not believe more police funding and more equipment is going to be a solution to finding more effective ways of mitigating aspects of community safety. Year after year, we spend more and more money on things like this, but we still get the same results. So in my opinion, a definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So I will not support that. There are different things that we can do. And I know it's politically inconvenient sometimes to deny money and to kind of facilitate community conversations around what the changing of the status quo could and should look like. But I feel like if we don't do that with the power of our vote, then we never will get there.
All right. Any other comments?
I did have a follow-up question for you, Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Given that just so I'm clear, these transactions were already approved in our existing budget, correct?
No, these
They approved, they were already allotted.
No, these
transactions are an application that is made to a program at the state level that we must apply for. They're competitive grants. This one, for example, allows for $25,000 for getting radar units that police use in traffic stops for speeding. And it also includes training and travel and meeting expenses for regional liaison around traffic control and management. So these are from the Governor's Highway Safety Program. All 21, 22, and 23 are grant applications that deal with how do we deal with various issues. Well, I'm sorry, not 23, but deal with grants that are provided to the city. So they're competitive grants. They are budgeted as they are awarded, but these are routine grant applications, yes, annual applications.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Is this, okay, I think you answered my question. Thanks.
Okay, so I think that to achieve Mr. Winston's, you'd have to change the Governor's Highway Safety Grant Program, but I understand his point. His point is philosophically, that's the only, you got to start somewhere. But the question is for starting somewhere, we would not have the authority to do anything except not apply for the grants.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so Ms. Watlington,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, especially since I would do anything to get some help with reducing anything that has to do with accidents for traffic violations and for speeding. Thank you.
Ms. Ajmira?
Yes.
Mr. Winston?
No.
Mr. Bakari?
Yes.
Mr. Driggs?
Yes.
Mr. Eggleston?
Yes.
Mr. Graham?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Newton?
Yes.
All right, the next item is item 23, which is to approve the unit price contract for the purchase of police pursuit-rated vehicles for 1 year and authorizing the manager to renew the contract for up to 4 one-year terms with possible price adjustments consistent with the purpose for which the contract was approved. This is actually the money that we use to purchase police vehicles. This contract is for the purchase for this year and the next 4 as negotiated. Do I have a
Move to
motion?
approve, Driggs.
Second, please?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Eggleston. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussions, Councilmember Watlington?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes.
Ms. Ajmira?
Yes.
Mr. Winston?
No.
Mr. Bakari?
Yes.
Mr. Driggs?
Yes.
Mr. Eggleston?
That second was actually my co-host on the podcast, Mr. Bakari, but I do vote yes.
Thank you. I apologize. Mr. Graham?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Newton?
Yes.
All right, with that, the next item is item 26. Excuse me, which is on-call fencing installation and repair services for unit price contracts for fencing installations and repair. They, with the manager allowed to renew the contracts for 2 one-year terms with possible price adjustments for the purpose which we are using. And this is for fence installation that meets security, ensure the protection of facilities and property as well as safety. And do I have a motion to approve?
Move to approve, Driggs.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Bakari, is there any discussion? All right, with that, no discussion. Mayor, Councilmember Watlington,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem,
Yes.
Ms. Ajmira,
Yes.
Mr. Winston,
No.
Mr. Bakari,
Yes.
Mr. Driggs,
Yes.
Mr. Eggleston,
Yes.
Mr. Graham,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Newton.
Yes.
All right, thank you. So we now are at a place that we have one speaker, and I'm not sure if we have,
I'd rather go ahead and start our business meeting and do the recognitions, awards and recognitions first. So before we begin with our speakers, we have one very important recognition to do today. It comes out of our community, the work that the community is doing. Annually, there is a Mayor's Mentoring Alliance awards recognition program. And it is filled with wonderful people, great speakers, lots of music, but more importantly, it's filled with caring adults for people, young people in this community who have mentored various programs and activities. And I would like to recognize January 2021 as National Mentoring Month. But first, I'd like to actually recognize the members of the Mayor's Mentoring Alliance Board and to thank them for all of the organizing and planning and recruitment and celebrations that they make possible. And so the chair of our Mentoring Alliance Board is Dion Wimbush, the vice chair, Kevin Campbell. The Education Committee chair is Letitia Shefferson. The Ignite Committee chair, I love that word, Ignite, for our kids, Iris Caldwell. The Connect Committee chair is Tracy Campbell. And the following members are at large: Alexandra Arrington, George Buggs III, Kenyatta Wheeler, Rochelle Joyce, Ross Dennis, Clarissa Finley, Ebony Moreham, Sabrina Clark, Takeem Dean, Tiana Glenn, and the staff liaison from the staff is our own team is Tiffany Johnson. I'm going to go ahead and read the proclamation as well. But I tell you guys, there's nothing like being around that kind of energy in a room, and I miss it greatly this year. Whereas each January, National Mentoring Month honors impactful contribution by mentors and urges more residents to serve as mentors, further aiding and building healthy relationships for kids to be able to make positive decisions. Whereas there's a great community need for mentoring, which has proven to impact youth through pairing them with genuine, responsible people who can provide guidance, motivation, and strengthen their confidence. Whereas mentorship enhances the social capital of youth, and through exposure of a variety of experiences and opportunities that lead to that increased economic mobility. Whereas the community advocates mentoring through the Mayor's Mentoring Alliance, which educates mentoring organizations on best practices and standards, ignites impactful and enduring mentor-mentee relationships, and connects Charlotte's mentoring community. And whereas the Mayor's Mentoring Alliance will honor those who are involved in mentoring virtually during their annual awards ceremony on took place on January the 21st, therefore, I, Alexander Lyles, Mayor of Charlotte, do hereby proclaim January 2021 as National Mentoring Month in the city of Charlotte and commend its observance to all citizens, and thank greatly those people on this board that really work hard to change the projection for some people, especially our youth, and all the work that they do annually throughout the year. I really appreciate. So with that, I wonder if someone could tell me if there is the speaker for item number 24, Chrissy Ashland, who is, I believe, on our Transit Advisory Committee. Is she available, Ms. Jackson?
She is, Madam. She is.
So I'd like to go right to item number 24 and ask Chrissy if you could go ahead and address the council. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor Lyles and members of council for your time tonight. My name is Chrissy Etzlin, and I am chair of CAT's Transit Services Advisory Committee. We represent and amplify the voice of transit riders in regards to CAT's day-to-day service operations. From where I sit, this is the situation with CAT's apps. There are 2 main apps, CAT's Pass for ticketing and Ride CATS for quote unquote real-time bus and train information. The ticketing app is good, and CATS is seeking council's permission to make it great by moving to a new vendor. I don't oppose that request. But the real-time app is, to put it bluntly, not good. It has never had real-time information since it launched in 2016. A press release at that time promised, and I quote, that the app provides customers real-time arrival information through GPS technology located on all buses and trains, end quote. To my knowledge, the app has never provided real-time GPS information. It simply shows when the static schedule says the next bus or train will arrive, which often has no relation to reality. My concern is that the discussion here before council about adopting a new ticketing app obscures the dismal state of CAT's real-time app, and that decisions around the ticketing app may have further delayed the repair of the real-time app. My understanding is that CATS is working with its real-time app vendor right now to actually implement real-time information, which would later be integrated into a new ticketing app. I'm glad the real-time app is finally being addressed, but council needs to ask who and what is to account for the real-time app never doing what it was supposed to do. My questions for CATS are, did CATS put a hold on implementing real-time information while it sought a ticketing app that could incorporate it? The existing ticketing app has been in use for several years. During that time, CATS could and should have been fixing its real-time app. And now it seems we still won't have real-time information until at least the launch of a new ticketing app, if not longer. And finally, when CATS contracted with a vendor to create the real-time app in 2016, can you tell me why we were promised something that still doesn't exist? I certainly don't oppose CATS wanting to improve the ticketing app for its riders, especially if one app can provide ticketing as well as real-time route planning. But what's been overlooked in this discussion is that we have a non-functional real-time app. CATS needs to prioritize providing real-time information to its riders, especially in this COVID time, when some routes have seen reduced service. Knowing when the next bus or train is coming is critical to transit riders. That concludes my remarks. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate your comments and your questions. Mr. Jones, do we have, first, I guess I need to know, do we have a motion to have the action authorize the manager to negotiate contracts with Dallas Area Rapid Transit and Unwire for the provision, implementation, and maintenance of a mobile ticketing application for 3 years. Authorize the city manager to renew the contracts for up to 2 one-year terms with price adjustments consistent with which the contracts were approved. Authorize the city manager to purchase additional software licenses, services, hardware maintenance, and support required to maintain the system as long as the city uses the system.
Motion to approve, but I'd like to hear a response from staff before we vote, please.
The actions.
Motion to approve from Eggleston.
I understand, but I just needed a motion.
Motion to approve.
For approval, okay? All right, now that we've had that motion.
You probably need a second too.
I guess I do need a second, so do I have a second?
Mayor, I'd like to suggest that we defer action on this item until we have an opportunity to delve into some of what we've just been told in greater detail. I don't know that we're going to resolve it quickly in the context of a consent item vote.
Second.
Madam Mayor, since
Yes,
we've
Mr.
already,
Bakari? Wait a
Thank
minute,
you.
I just want to make sure I got Mr. Driggs and Ms. Watlington for a motion for deferral until the questions raised by the speaker are addressed. Now, Mr. Bakari.
thank you. Yeah, I don't know what the correct motion is, but I would, part of me would tend to agree with Councilmember Driggs that we need to get to the bottom of a lot of things, but the other part of me believes that that's exactly what we did last time, that this came on and we deferred it. So I think what we need to do is to Councilman Eggleston's point, hear directly from CATS, Mr. Lewis, as it relates to why what we've just heard there, paired with a few other questions I think a couple of us have, aren't things that should concern us enough to not vote for this.
So Mr. Bakari has suggested that we hear from Mr. Lewis before the vote for a deferral or any other action is taken. Mr. Lewis is in a room and available. Mr. Lewis, you heard Mr. Bakari's request for information on why now.
So thank you.
You're on mute, Mr. Lewis. Somebody needs to get him off of mute.
Do I?
John, just hit the button in front of you, to your right. Look up.
It's green. It's already up.
There you go.
Hello? Can you hear me, Mayor?
Thank you. Mr. Lewis,
Yes.
you heard from one of your, actually a citizen on your advisory committee, as well as the questions from the council.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. So first, let me, I think we have to unpack what is before council tonight. The issues that were brought up by Ms. Eslin of our Transit Service Advisory Committee is not in regard to the mobile ticketing app. It's in regard to our real-time app that was acted on by council last fall and is set to go live in June. And so I'm concerned that we are talking about one issue under the guise of another, and we need to clarify that. So what council has before it is our mobile ticketing app, which Ms. Eslin, in her remarks, said operated very well, and we're excited to move forward with this. We have to remember that the current pilot that we have will expire in April. And if we do not move forward, if we delay this even further, we will end up without a mobile ticketing app, a mobile payment app that is utilized to a very high percentage by our customers today. And I don't believe we should have a gap in that very important service. In regard to the real-time app that is in production, she is right. The original CATS app did not utilize the GPS technology in order to provide real-time information. What it was doing is utilizing the schedule to then make predictions of where the vehicle would be. That is why we ended that contract and moved forward with a new vendor who is in the last stages of providing an actual real-time app that is connected to GPS technology that will provide our customers with the information on exactly where the vehicle will be, and that should go live in June. The broader issue then that was brought up at the last council meeting, why are we having separate apps, one for payment and one for real time? This DART system, this is an issue that historically throughout the transit industry has been a challenge for transit providers. The Dallas Area Rapid Transit System, after going through multiple vendors over a period of over 10 years, decided to move forward with their own app that met all of the needs that they needed as a transit entity. And then, because theirs worked so well, they are now providing it as a service, as a contractor to other agencies. And so our goal is to move forward with the mobile ticketing app offered by Dallas Area Rapid Transit System that will also have the ability to merge the real-time information under one umbrella.
All right. So I think what we heard from Mr. Lewis said, this is not the time app, that is something that it's the fare app that's really something that's necessary or used by many riders right now, and that there is an issue going forward to add the on-time app that's under the Dallas Rapid Transit Unwire. So I have several questions. So the first person that I saw the hand up was Ms. Ajmira, followed by Mr. Driggs. I recognize Ms. Ajmira.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Lewis, the reason we had deferred this item a couple of weeks ago was to figure out a long-term vision for our CATS applications. And that is to integrate where you could do real-time, where you could get real-time data, including the payment processing within one app. So some questions that were asked at that meeting was, did you go back to the vendors that you have had a contract with in the past for real-time app to see if they can do payment processing? That was number one. other question that had come up was, were you able to look at other vendors who could do both in one app? I understand that we have already made investments in real-time app, but if there has been delays, we need to question the direction we are moving in. So I guess I'm trying to understand all the questions that were asked. We have not gotten an answer on those. I understand those are two different applications, but one project has not been successful. I don't know how successful we will be with this new project. So I would like to get an answer on all the questions that were asked at the last meeting. Thanks.
Excuse me, Council, if you'll refer to it, just came to you, the Q&A from the last meeting that when it was deferred, should be in your inbox for me Friday around 7 o'clock at night. So if you look in Outlook, or I can text it to you again, but there was a response, like a 3-page or 2-page response. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I've not seen that, but Mr. Lewis, if you could just go over the questions that were asked, I would appreciate it.
Sure. So your question about is there one provider that can do both? There is not, I'm sorry? There is not a current provider that can provide both applications. That is why Dallas Area Rapid Transit developed their own and is now offering that as a service. So that's why we're going with DART in this action tonight. Your question as to the real-time app, remember, council took action on that in the fall. That app is moving forward and is ready, will be going live in the next couple of months, by June at the latest. The long-term strategy that you are referring to is we will have the real-time app goes live in June. The Dallas Area Rapid Transit System mobile ticketing will go live, if council takes action tonight, around the same time, and then the two will be integrated so that customers will have one app underneath CATS that will do both real-time and mobile payment. And that is what was in the fact sheet that was sent earlier.
Okay, so just to clarify, so user can log into one interface and able to do both function within one app?
That's correct.
Okay, well, that answers my question, and I'm ready to move forward. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Driggs.
Yes, my understanding is that what Mr. Lewis is saying is that the vote that we're being asked to take tonight essentially has no bearing on the issue of a real-time scheduling app, which is a separate subject. I would just like to ask the speaker if she has any response to that, or concedes that that is true.
Ms. Ashland, are you still with us?
Yeah, I'm here. What I would say to that is, yes, I do think that you should approve this, my personal opinion, but I think that this raises questions about the real-time app, and I'm curious if that has been delayed while waiting to approve this new payments app that can incorporate the real-time data. It brings really both issues into question with this one vote.
So, Madam Mayor, based on what I'm hearing now, I would withdraw my motion and suggest that we do proceed to approve this. I think there are questions we still need to answer, but it doesn't sound to me like it's worth delaying the progress of the ticketing app. So I'm withdrawing my motion.
All right.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to second Councilmember Eggleston's motion.
What was Councilmember Eggleston's
So approved.
Yeah, it was to approve it originally.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, so let's get through the questions. The motion now on the floor has been made by Mr. Eggleston, seconded by Ms. Watlington for approval. So the next person I had is Ms. Isel, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Lewis, for that information. I plan on supporting this, but I did want to hear the response to the speaker's questions. and I can separate the two. I was the one that asked about the integration in the last meeting, and so in the meantime, I appreciate the information you sent us on Friday, John, but I did look into some different agencies around the country and in other countries, and I didn't find an app that had both of them integrated right now. And I spoke with somebody out of Vancouver who said that that's, the key is really that we can have an app that will eventually be able to interface. And so what you're saying to us is that you feel comfortable that these two different platforms will be able to interface under one app by late summer or fall. Right, John, that's what you're...
If we're able to move forward with the Dallas area rapid transit system, we will have the mobile payment and the real time by early summer. The integration will happen after that. And then because Dallas area has done the integration that we are talking about, and they've done that successfully.
Got it. So yeah, so that's what I'm hearing. I am separating the two. I'm going to hold you to that, but that was what I needed to hear, and I will be supporting this motion because we have to also remember, and I've done this before, that I think it was in the pilot phase that you're coming up to the light rail and the train's coming or your bus is coming and the app isn't working. And now you're getting on and there's people that are going to get on that bus and we miss that fare revenue because you couldn't get an app that worked. And so I think it's critically important that we have the functionality as soon as possible to have a form of mobile payment. So I will be supporting this, but I'm also very anxious to see us be able to integrate the two functions under one app sometime this summer, as you mentioned. So thank you.
All right, Mr. Eggleston?
Thank you. I won't repeat any of the points that have been made. I do think we should approve this and allow there to be progress sooner than later on it. But I also don't think it's at all unrelated that there are concerns about the other app when we're talking about this one. And frankly, if there could ever be an advocate as we look at a multimodal comprehensive transportation plan that we're I think most of us, if not all of us, are behind moving forward on. If we don't have one of the leaders of a citizen advisory group around transit confident in something as simple as an app that we have, I think we're really setting ourselves up for failure because Chrissy ought to be one of our biggest champions for this transit plan. And if someone comes and asks her as a transit user and as a leader on this board, what do you think about investing all this money in our transportation network? And she says, well, they can't even get an app right. That's kind of stuff that's not acceptable when we're trying to be very aggressive in expanding the amount of money that we're spending on transit. So it's disappointing that it's still, and we've gotten, all of us as council members have gotten complaints from people over the years that this app has never worked correctly. So the fact that it's taken as long as it has to fix, I think is disappointing. And I think it's these kind of things that will erode the support we have on the bigger things we're trying to do around transit. So I hope the early summer timeline is accurate. And I hope that when it comes online in time, in early summer, that it works the way that we think it's going to work because I don't know, it's just, some of these things continue to be frustrating. That's it.
Mr. Newton?
So does Dallas contract out their real-time app with a vendor other than DART, or does Dallas's DART supply both Dallas a mobile ticketing app and also a real-time app?
DART is Dallas. So it is the transit agency, when going through the same conversations that we are going through, was able to develop their app utilizing an external IT firm, is now offering their app that they've developed to other transit agencies. So DART and Dallas are one and the same.
I think that wasn't, I think, Mr. Newton's question. Mr. Newton, was that your question?
No, so I understand that Dallas and DART are one and the same, that Dallas and DART also provide a mobile ticketing app, which is what we will be voting on. That app also happens to have an integration function, but I'm wondering if Dallas and DART also provide a real-time app. Or is it just the mobile ticketing and integration?
Understood. Under their system, they are following the same path that we have. They take a real-time feed from another provider and integrate it into their app. So we're following the exact same path that they have.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thank you. That answers my question. I'm in support of this as well. Thank you.
Mr. Bakari?
Thank you. I'm highly frustrated and highly disappointed that we've gotten to this point on this. You know, we pulled this from the last business meeting we had purposely because we had concerns. And I, for one, feel like aside from a very positioned memo, defending exactly what it was that we're already doing, know absolutely nothing more about what's under the curtains of this one. And normally, we need to be able to trust staff to operate and do things and not get at that level of detail. But we have many red flags going off that are indications of a problem. And that problem is we don't necessarily know exactly what we're doing right now. So at this point, there's no point in delaying it any further because we just delayed it and I know nothing more. I believe there are, again, red flags when we look at something in the nature of we're going to take down something that you said in your memo to us in the mobile ticketing functionality we've already piloted, we have in place that is very much beloved by the ridership. It's just a matter of where you're heading from there. Well, we're taking that down from a partner who said they'd work with us. I know that much, in the hopes of a net new thing that doesn't exist in the market now to replace it, at least in its current form. I mean, just as a technologist, I find that highly confusing and risky. When we have something that works, that we wouldn't at least have a risk-sensitive plan that said, okay, well, we're going to strike a interim deal, even if we want to move away from those folks in our own backyard that built it here. That we would have some kind of interim plan that kept the capability going for those who really use it and like it and need it. So there's that. I mean, the questions that our advisory committee speaker just spoke on of, you know, why did the real-time app never do what it said it was going to do for a long time? I mean, these are all just red flags that make me concerned about it. But, you know, at this point, I don't know that a delay is worthwhile, that we're going to learn anything net new than we haven't already. But I do share what Councilman Eggleston said, those concerns deeply. And I'll just leave it by saying, you know, I've experienced, maybe not in transportation, but in many other industry points, the challenges of implementing new technology, but also the challenges of not doing it correctly. And it's very possible that we could be kicking a can down the road on this that prohibits our ability to have functionality our riders need in a top 20 size city, and not just prohibiting it, but making it more costly and more difficult to do so in the future. So I'm disappointed.
So, Mr. Lewis, I think you've heard the council. My suggestion would be that if the council passes this tonight, that we actually, you take perhaps a view before you do this that really looks at all of the things that have been acknowledged and make sure that the critical path makes it possible to resolve those. You hear very clearly that this is something that would be required, and I think the council should approve this tonight. But I also think that you have the opportunity to review it and look at it and go through a critical analysis professionally and with your IT folks, the manager, and resolve this. It's going to be coming back, and I think we need more information for each step along the critical path of implementation. So with that, I'm going to do a roll call. We have a motion to approve.
Madam Mayor, Ms. Johnson would like to speak.
Yes, Ms. Johnson.
I didn't see your hand up. I am seeing hands up, which is how I'm getting the list. So if you put your hand up, I can see that. So Ms. Johnson?
Thank you, Mayor. So I kind of just wanted to piggyback off of Mr. Bakari. Can you all hear me? I'm getting a little bit of feedback.
Yes,
Okay.
I can hear you fine, yes.
Thank you. And when we deferred this vote, it was a red flag for me because he is the IT professional or the technologist, as he stated. So when we asked for more information, I'm of the same feeling. We got a memo on Friday evening, but last week we had at least 2 briefings from transportation regarding the Silver Line and the mobility plan, which were in depth, and those are plans that are 10 years out. So I would have thought we would have gotten that type of update regarding this when we had questions, so that we didn't spend a half an hour on it, in a city council meeting. And it's okay to ask questions, but there's still a lot of confusion. I would also ask, as far as an interim plan. So I've only lived in Charlotte for 5 years, and some of the high level or big projects there's been delays on, such as the Hawthorne Bridge and I-77, the toll, and the cross trail. So I would ask, before we get into this project where we know there are red flags, is there any contingency or any plan for the vendor that if they're not able to integrate the dual systems by June, that there's a penalty, that we have an interim plan to go to the system that we know works, or something. But I'm really big on accountability. And if we're hearing from the public and we on council still don't really understand it, which, and that's okay because we rely on the city staff. But if there are red flags, I would say that we just really need to be careful about the contract and how we're doing this. But I say all that to say that if we ask questions, we are in the same position that we were in a few weeks ago when we deferred this, minus a memo. So this would be the type of information that we would like to have briefings on when we ask for that. That's all. Thank you.
All right. So Councilmember Watlington?
Yes.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes.
Ms. Ajmira?
Yes.
Mr. Winston?
No.
Mr. Bakari?
No.
All right. Mr. Driggs?
Yes.
Mr. Eggleston?
Yes.
Mr. Graham?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
No.
Mr. Newton?
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much. The motion passes. All right. We will now go to our public forum notes and start off with our public forum. Each quarter we have a public forum, and we tonight have 3 speakers signed up. And if the staff is ready for the virtual part of this. Excuse me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gesundheit.
Our first speaker is Perry Smith with New Church Ministry. Mr. Smith?
Hey, good evening. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Well, first, giving honor to God and to you, Madam Mayor, all the councilmen and women in Charlotte. I'm just sitting here since 5 o'clock, and I really enjoyed just, getting a look at Charlotte and the city. My name is Perry Smith. I'm the senior pastor of Unified Church of North Carolina. We actually established a ministry here on Park Road. And our mission is the unification, education, and empowerment of individuals to a life with Jesus at the center of it all. We seek to serve families, communities, and the nation through the discipleship and with the love of Christ. We seek to build individuals to the acknowledgement of their gifts and purpose through the Word of God. So I say all that to say we're help, and we want you all to know, we want the city of Charlotte to know that we're here. And we're just thankful that the Lord has sent us to come to Charlotte and minister to the individuals in Charlotte. And you'll hear more. So it's really an introduction that I seek, to introduce this ministry to the city of Charlotte, to know that Unified Church of North Carolina is in the Park Road area. And we're here just to help and provide, anything that you all would need. And we're excited to be here.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate these introductions, and this community has a strong faith-based network with opportunities. Crisis Assistance Ministry started with a faith-based connection all the way to Movement Day and all of those things. So welcome, and please connect with our Clergy Association. They help us tremendously, and we look forward to meeting you in person when it's possible and welcoming you to our community.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Cameron Pruitt. He would like to speak about the non-discrimination ordinance, a non-discrimination ordinance. Mr. Pruitt?
Mr. Pruitt, you've been unmuted, so you can speak now.
Oh, thank you so much. Can you hear me, Madam Mayor?
If you would speak a little bit closer to the mic, it might be a little bit better volume.
How about now?
That's better. Yes.
Thank you so much. Good evening, Madam Mayor and City Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Cameron Pruitt, and I use he, him pronouns. I currently have the privilege of serving as president of the LGBTQ+ Democrats of Mecklenburg County. The people who live and work in Charlotte are asking for equal opportunity and equal access to have a chance to build a life for themselves and their loved ones. LGBTQ+ people face higher rates of violence, housing insecurity, and unemployment. As President Biden's recent executive order notes, transgender Black Americans face unconscionably high levels of workplace discrimination, homelessness, and violence, including fatal violence. The LGBTQ+ Democrats have been advocating for protections as part of the NC is Ready coalition, led by Equality North Carolina and the Campaign for Southern Equality for months now. We want Charlotte to develop an expansive, inclusive ordinance that protects people on the basis of natural or religious hairstyles, gender identity or expression, sexual orientation, and also strengthen protections based on marital or familial status, pregnancy, sex, race, national origin, and immigration status. Charlotte has the power to do this today, but has chosen to defer and delay these life-saving actions. I'm appreciative that several members have voiced their support in private, but with the county commission and several towns in Mecklenburg publicly considering action, it is frustrating and perplexing for those of us who haven't been heard and have heard mostly silence on this issue from our elected leaders in this city. Do the members of City Council support an enforceable NDO that ensures equal opportunities in employment, public accommodations, and services? The people of Charlotte are not asking for something that hasn't already been done. It's been done successfully in Greensboro, Durham, and multiple other localities in North Carolina, not to mention all the other cities of our size, such as Atlanta, and in the South in places as far as Columbia and Charleston. A non-discrimination ordinance is pro-human, pro-equality, and pro-business. It will save lives. I ask the City Council to please take these life-saving actions that I know they're capable of. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pruitt. I want you to know that there are conversations with NC Equality going on, and I believe that while we have listened and heard, the ordinances that have been approved are not all the same ordinances. So we are collecting the material and information from where other communities have taken this to make sure that we are doing this. I spoke with the county. I have spoken with the county. I think they're doing a resolution, which is a little bit different than an ordinance. So an ordinance requires a little more work, and we're working on what we might do. And I really appreciate you coming in, because I do believe, and speaking, because I do believe that this community of Charlotte really did go out and say, this is what we will do. And we've taken that step, and now we want to do it in a way that works with the actions that provide for our city to realize its values of equity and inclusion and diversity. So with that, thank you very much. Our next speaker is Michelle Aldrich. Miss Aldrich,
Present, yes, ma'am.
thank you. Miss Aldrich, we can hear you.
Oh, yes, ma'am. Yes, I'll begin. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. WCCB News reported, and I quote, "People in Plaza Midwood are expressing mounting frustration with the controversial bus lane only project on Central Avenue. I live in 285, one city block north of Central Avenue, representing my neighborhood, Mary Oaks, where the bus lane pilot program begins. I have lived here 15 years. Since you all on council that voted to begin this program on the worst city road imaginable during a pandemic to bias the data in your favor and directed CDOT and CATS to implement your transportation plan, I am present to share many reasons why this bus lane program does not create a safer environment for people, contrary to what was published on the Charlotte Transportation page.gov. 1, car collisions with personal injury have increased exponentially within the program stretch of Central Avenue. 2, buses are allowed to travel the car lanes, which only have 2 total lanes, 1 eastbound and 1 westbound, while cars are restricted from bus lanes. 3, a left turn onto or from Central Avenue, east and westbound, is barely possible, while creating one of the most dangerous, unpredictable, and scary driving scenarios you can imagine. It's akin to you being the frog in the real-life game of Frogger, deadly. 4, jaywalking has increased. I see more bus riders using the bus lane as a waiting area to dart across the road and abandoning safe crosswalks and breaking the law. 5, bus lanes are forcing drivers to search for alternative, less congested ways to travel and avoid this dangerous stretch of Central Avenue, including cutting through family-friendly neighborhoods, taking roads normally not traveled, which makes those roads more busy and dangerous, such as Sharon Amity, Albemarle Road, and Eastway Drive. The Charlotte City Transportation website states the city's vision includes creating a connected, safe community. Yet, I have just listed several facts to argue and disprove this idea. This dedicated bus lane situation, which has been unfairly imposed upon those of us who live near Central Avenue, has become exhaustive, an almost unbearable place to live and shop. The small businesses are suffering, as well as most East Side residents. Living here now is harder than ever. And since 2021 is an election year, you all who willed the council votes had best listen to your constituents and vote no to continue these Central Avenue bus lanes. I read charlotteagenda.com today. The city wants the taxpayers to pay billions more dollars using proposed sales and potential property tax hikes. Some leaders on council believe a costly transportation plan could help desegregate. One thing I do know, you will lose votes and potentially your city positions and careers. Please vote no bus lanes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Aldrich. We will be reviewing this as a pilot project, and we will be reviewing, and we have heard lots of comments, and everything that you've mentioned will be considered as we assess this project. So thank you very much. Now with that, we have 3 public hearings. The first public hearing is item number 8, public hearing for Intercontinental Capital Group Business Investment Grant for approval of a City of Charlotte Business Investment Grant for Intercontinental Capital Group. I do not believe we have any speakers signed up to speak on this item.
Move to
May I
close.
have a motion to open and close the public, a motion to close the public hearing?
Driggs, yes.
Second, Eggleston.
Thank you, Mr. Driggs and Mr. Eggleston. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, Ms. Watlington?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes.
Ms. Ajmira?
Yes.
Mr. Winston?
Yes.
Mr. Bakari?
Yes.
Mr. Driggs?
Yes.
Mr. Eggleston?
Yes.
Mr. Graham?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Newton?
Yes.
All right, thank you. The next public hearing we have is for the public hearing on Oak Hills Property Area Voluntary Annexation. We do have a speaker signed up, Mr. Casey Warner. Mr. Werner, would you like to speak on this item?
Thank you for having me. I'm here and just available for any, to answer any questions that there may be.
Are there any questions for?
Motion to
regarding
close
this
the public
item?
hearing.
We have a motion to close the public.
Second, Driggs.
Eggleston and Driggs.
And is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, Councilmember Watlington?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes.
Ms. Ajmira?
Yes.
Mr. Winston?
Yes.
Mr. Bakari?
Yes.
Mr. Driggs?
Yes.
Mr. Eggleston?
Yes.
Mr. Graham? Sorry.
Yeah.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Newton? The public
Yes.
hearing is closed. The next item is a public hearing on approval. I'm sorry. Item number 10, a public hearing on Watermark Mallet Creek Area Voluntary Annexation Petition. We have Mr. Brown and Ms. Lenz. Do you have any comments that you would like to make?
Only if there are questions, Madam Mayor.
Motion to close the public hearing. Eggleston.
Second, Driggs.
All right, we have a motion to close. Mr. Eggleston and Mr. Driggs, is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, Councilmember Watlington?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes.
Ms. Ajmira?
Yes.
Mr. Winston?
Yes.
Mr. Bakari?
Yes.
Mr. Driggs?
Yes.
Mr. Eggleston?
Yes.
Mr. Graham?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Newton?
Yes.
All right. The next item on our agenda is, hold on, item 11, to adopt a resolution to repeal Rule 9 to align city administrative guidance regarding promotional processes with the city charter provisions for the Civil Service Board, and to clarify that adopted human resources policies, standards, and guidelines supersede any prior administrative versions. We have the city attorney as well as the city attorney, Mr. Baker and Mr. Brown from the city attorney's office. And I believe that we have also outside counsel if there are questions regarding this item. So the first item is, do I have a motion to adopt this resolution?
So moved, Driggs.
Do I have a second?
Newton, second.
Mr. Newton, thank you. All right. I'm looking, are there any hands up? I see Ms. Ajmira. Ms. Ajmira.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a couple of questions on this. Mr. Attorney, how many active...
Ms. Ajmira, can you get closer to your mic, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
How is it now?
If you could get a little bit closer.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Speak up louder.
All right. So how many, Mr. Attorney, how many active lawsuits and grievances are there involving Rule 9?
Thank you for your question, Councilmember Ajmira. I believe, and I don't, you've asked a really good question because I know that there are some personnel litigation coming out of the fire department in particular. I don't know that all of them relate to Rule 9 issues, but I think Rule 9 has come up in some of those issues. I can get a final number, and I don't know if Mr. Brown, Matt Brown, is an assistant city attorney with me. I don't know if he's got that information or not, but we can certainly give that to you because I'd have to dig into those particular lawsuits to determine whether or not Rule 9 has come up in those discussions.
Mr. Brown, do you have any additional information on this?
I'm not sure if he's...
Wendy, you unmuted Colin Brown, but I certainly do not have that.
No, that's not the right Brown. This is Matt Brown. Colin, but we'll be glad to listen to any advice you'd like to have on this. I guess, let me make sure I understand. There we are. Thank you.
Okay, there you go. That's right, Mr. Brown.
Hello, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Good evening. As I understand, the question is how many lawsuits are currently based on Rule 9 at this time? Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
I don't believe any of the lawsuits, there's a cause of action based directly on Rule 9, but I would like to have a chance to go back and review that tonight and follow up with y'all tomorrow, if that's okay.
Sure. So are there any outstanding grievances that involves Rule 9?
So the grievances, generally speaking, are going to be personnel grievances based on some level of discrimination or fail to follow policy. Again, Rule 9 may be coming up in some of those grievances, but you've asked a question about whether or not the complaint has been based on Rule 9, and I think that's the issue that we're having, because for the most part, these grievances are based on a number of other allegations of that are personnel related. But we can go through to find out if specifically Rule 9 has come up in them. But Rule 9 is something that we have had numerous conversations about in terms of the promotional policy, and particularly coming out of the fire department, and what processes and procedures they are supposed to adhere to.
So I guess let me clarify my question here, Mr. Baker. What I'm trying to understand is, will Rule 9 be involved in any litigation?
Again, there's not a specific cause of action on Rule 9 that I understand, but Rule 9 comes up in the litigation. So it's kind of a hybrid answer, but it's not, I'm not aware, and Mr. Brown, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not aware that there's a specific cause of action that is grounded solely in failure to adhere to Rule 9. But there have been occasions where Rule 9, and this gets into the conflict that Rule 9 has with other members or other provisions of our charter, that there have been disagreements, which was the basis for the report that I asked Parker Poe to provide to me and the city in terms of providing guidance for how to resolve some of these conflicts that are going on in the department.
Okay, well, I look forward to having that report that answers my question that I had asked as to if there are any active lawsuits that refers to Rule 9 or any grievances. I have a second question here. So without this Rule 9, what will the oversight look like for a fire chief?
So the oversight will essentially be precisely what the charter provides. And the charter section that I'm referring to is section 4.61U, which states specifically that the chief of police and the chief of the fire department shall have authority to make all promotions of officers of their respective departments subject to majority approval of the Civil Service Board, which is essentially what you have now. Where Rule 9 comes in is that Rule 9 essentially provides specific responsibility and authority to the personnel director as it relates to the promotional process. And again, as we mentioned to you back in October, Rule 9 was implemented by the City Council, and it effectively, at a minimum, amends, but is certainly in conflict with a provision of the charter. And the issue, the legal issue that we have is that the City Council does not have the legal authority to amend the charter through a resolution, which is what happened here with Rule 9.
So what I struggle with is that we know that there has been conflict with the charter, but it's taken decades to determine that Rule 9 is not valid. And that's what I struggle with. Have we asked North Carolina attorney Josh Stein for his legal opinion on this?
I have not. I don't think that it's necessary to do that. Basically, the superiority of the charter versus a local act is pretty much uniform and axiomatic. So I don't think that reaching out to the Attorney General to tell me what I think I already know makes a lot of sense in this case. It's clear that a charter will always supersede a local decision by the council on the same subject matter.
I understand. I would still be interested in hearing his legal opinion on this, as we have heard from many of our firefighters who have written emails to us with many concerns about the oversight. And with that, I don't have any additional questions, but I do feel that this Rule 9 needs more study, and repealing it will take away the assurances of an equitable hiring and promotion process. Thank you.
Mr. Winston?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to kind of give my understanding of where we're at. As Mr. Baker said, and I think to put it in the plain English, is that this Rule 9 was created by City Council back in 1973 in what is actually an illegal act and perhaps an unconstitutional act under North Carolina law. You know, things get done over time in government that aren't right. And as we, I think, are very well aware of right now, those things, those wrong things will be perpetuated until somebody challenges it or folks in power actually correct it. So this is what I see us doing. I think there is wisdom in the way our government is set up, specifically around the council manager form of government. I would just ask my colleagues to just think about the limitations that we've had as it relates, and to think about the context of the way some of the decisions have been made in government and the way government was structured. Up until very recently, and this has been the job that Mr. Jones has come in here to do in particular, it was run under the run your own business model, where each department was siloed, and especially when it came to human resources practices and departments in that. So we have really been looking at, over the past, I guess, since Mr. Jones has been there, of eliminating that and creating the horizontal alignment that is necessary. I think that this brings us more, obviously, more in alignment to the Charter, law, and the Constitution, but I think it also brings some of the issues that we face closer to council. I would remind us that we are in a council manager form of government, and we can look at things that are happening within our departments through our interactions with our city manager. From what I can tell, while these are all personnel decisions, obviously fire and police are special circumstances, that being that this lives within the human resources department, it separates us from being able to have effective conversations with our staff. I think this is right in the ship, and allowing us to have more critical conversation from an effective policy and governance perspective that we are not able to have right now. I don't know if that actually clarifies anything, because it was a confusing a bit of nuance and intricacies in there, but I hope that we will support this and then do the hard work of addressing the source of the issues and coming to a better conclusion as we move forward.
Thank you. Mr. Newton?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think I might have gotten a bit ahead of myself. I've got my items mixed up. I was not interested in seconding this motion. I do have serious concerns about the retraction or the elimination of Rule 9. I would ask that I be allowed to retract my second on this particular item. And then, of course, leave the floor open for whomever else to second this if they so desire, which maybe, Mr. Winston, you might be interested in doing.
All right. All right, Ms. Johnson. Ms. Johnson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I know I've asked for this before when this issue came up. Is there anyone from the firefighters union available to answer any questions? And if not, so we know that council members get numerous emails from firefighters union, and we've not had the opportunity to speak with them directly other than meetings that we might schedule with them directly as I have. So the fact that we get so much pushback from the union, I just want the opportunity for them to be able to address their thoughts on the repeal of this item. We've gotten emails up to last week, so I'm not comfortable in repealing this without having more information from them. I would love another item if we could take this to the governance committee to really do a deeper dive and be able to hear from the union and understand the effect that this will have on the operations and moving forward. But if that's not an option, if that's not an option to move this to committee, then I won't be supporting it tonight.
So, Ms. Johnson, I think we all struggle. You've raised a really good point about how do we get input from the people that work with us, but we don't officially, under our rules, we're not allowed to have a union. I know that it's very difficult. You lived in a place where unions were making changes and improving lives and doing a number of things, but in North Carolina, we are not able to invite a union to a negotiation of some sort or answering these questions, because I think that I think your intent is to say the firefighters that would like to speak to this issue should have the ability to speak to it. I just want
to well, they're group, and and I am from an area where they work with management collaboratively, but we've heard from the group, it's representing some of the members of the firefighters. We hear from them; they're vocal.
Yes,
so I would ask that we be able to hear from them before making this decision.
Mr. Baker.
If I could just have a brief moment to tell you what has happened since our meeting with you in October of this year. The fire department drafted a promotional process, which is, I think it's GO 206.01, which we have provided to the union reps. We provided that to them on November the 14th, gave them the opportunity to provide input, which they did on November the 25th. And we responded to some of the questions that they had in writing on December the 11th of 2020. And we also made a presentation just for a complete transparency. We did make a presentation. I made a presentation with outside counsel to the Civil Service Board. They had some questions about what this process looked like and how it would change their understanding of the process. And we made that presentation to the board on January the 5th, specifically to make sure that they understood that their role, their charter role in this process would not change at all as a result of the request that we're making, that the promotional process from the chief of the fire department and the police department would be made subject to the civilian or civil service board's approval. So that has changed. The only issue here, as we mentioned in October, is this issue of the primacy between a charter provision that we have with the city and a process or a resolution that the council has enacted that effectively changes the charter. And the bottom line is that you cannot, by a local decision, change what is effectively state law. You don't have the authority to do that. And that has been explained to the folks in the union. That's been explained to the attorney. I know Ms. Maloney sent a letter to the board today. I received it at 3 o'clock. I don't know when you all may have received it, where she raises some questions and concerns, but does not address the fundamental issue, which is in 1973, the council did not have the authority to effectively change your charter. And in the process of getting these various rules and procedures together and aligned and not in conflict with one another, which I think is a source of significant consternation for all members of the fire department, whether they're the management level or they're on the other side, are these multiple policies and procedures that don't seem to work with one another. There seem to be some traditional practices that have occurred, some of which aren't exactly codified the way that I think that an organization of this size and prominence should have very clear delineation and understanding of what these processes are. So this is the first of a series of processes that will occur, but the one that requires city council action. I don't know what would happen given the fact that I have given you an opinion that you have a process or a procedure that does not appear that you had the authority, you being the city council of 1973, to enact. We have an issue, and we would like to get that issue resolved as quickly as possible, because since 1973, there has been some case law that effectively says if you've got procedures and you're not acting in accordance with those procedures, that in and of itself could create a potential basis for a legal challenge. That's a case that came down about 3, 4, 5 years ago that keeps a lot of city attorneys up at night trying to make sure that there aren't any de facto policies out there, procedures out there that we're not actually adhering to. And that's the reason for this particular issue here. We don't have an issue with the spirit of Rule 9 or what it was attempting to do. It is who enacted Rule 9. That's the problem that we have here. And again, we have tried to get back to the actual charter direction of how promotional processes are supposed to proceed in the police department and the fire department, which is under the authority of the individual chiefs, as opposed to splitting up the authority to include the HR director. But again, HR, human resources, the city attorney's office, we will all be a part of the process in advising and counseling the fire department and the police department going forward on all their personnel matters.
So I wanted to just go back. I believe we had a motion, and Mr. Newton, I'm sorry, my iPad was running out of power, and I think you said that you wanted to withdraw your motion. Second?
Yes, ma'am.
I'll second it.
And then who seconded the item after?
Bakari.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that we had that. All right, so then before I circle back to Mr. Winston and Ms. Ajmira, one of the questions, I think you said this, but I want to just, before we go back to the.
Madam Mayor, my hand is up as well.
Okay, Ms. Watlington is next.
And I also wanted to follow up to my question, but I'll wait for Ms. Watlington.
Okay, Ms. Watlington, and we'll circle back around, okay?
Real briefly, I just wanted to say, going forward, as we think about the conversation we had regarding the ticketing item, when we come back to these for decision, it will be very helpful if we just started from the beginning and gave a foundational understanding of what the issue is at hand, what are the challenges to the position, and what, beyond the legal recommendation, how we intend to address what the challenges were. I heard Mr. Baker say that we had looked into how to preserve the spirit of the law. What I have not yet heard is how we continue that. For me, as Councilmember Winston said, the bottom line is if this is unconstitutional, then we've got to follow the letter of the law. But that does not mean that we can't figure out other ways to preserve the spirit of the law. And I would appreciate it if we could get that information on the front end when we're ready to make these kinds of decisions. That's all.
Thank you. I guess that's the point that I wanted to ask and make sure that
if we didn't know something was unconstitutional or illegal or not consistent unconstitutionally, or now that we do know it, I think the danger of knowing makes us more open to liability. So I think, Mr. Baker, I heard you say that it was something that has worked, but it's now challenged and there's case law about it, and that we having these discussions, it's important for us to recognize that right now we're in a very difficult position if challenged this way. But I also think that what Ms. Watlington and Mr. Winston have said is that this also gives us an opportunity to write a policy that is under our human resources rule that actually gets to some of these issues. It's interesting to me the difference between, this rule applies equally to police and fire, but we obviously hear more from our firefighters. So I think that Ms. Johnson has a good point that there needs to be some review of what the spirit, and Ms. Watlington's point, the spirit of this, but not just in spirit. What is our HR policy and procedure to do it? So I don't think that this is always a difficult time when we know that we've got to do something that makes it right, but we don't have the answer to assure what we want to do. But I think that we have time to get to that place. And how we do that, I believe, would be a question for our city attorney and our two chiefs to come back and say, here's what how we're doing this, and this is what we do. But this is, again, we have a motion, and I think we now want to, Mr. Winston wanted to come back around. I'm sorry, we have a new speaker, Ms. Ice, Mayor Pro Tem, and then we'll come back to Mr. Winston.
I don't have another comment.
All right, and then we'll come back to Ms. Ajmira and Ms. Johnson. We want to come back to you.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up to the question that I was asking.
Okay. All right, Mayor Pro Tem.
I don't mind if Ms. Johnson wants to follow up with finish her questioning first, and then I'll go.
All right, Ms. Johnson.
Thank you, Ms. Isel. So a couple things. The city attorney used the term union as the city attorney. And when I used it, I was called a Yankee.
Well,
so I want to clarify.
Sorry, I did not intend to do that. It was just a statement that we need to understand and just be careful as we use the proper language for what we have in the state.
Well, and that's what I'd like him to clarify, because it was confusing what just transpired. So I'd like him to clarify what authority the group that Tom Brewer heads in our city, what authority they have. Secondly,
can I explain this?
Well, no, secondly, I'm sorry. Secondly, before I get cut off, secondly, I wanted to ask Patrick, a couple things. You said if the city manager, the city attorney, and the two chiefs can sit down to talk about what policy we could be written. Am I to understand we've been under a policy for the last 47 or 48 years, and now we're saying it's unconstitutional or not proper? Is that what I'm hearing?
That's not what I'm saying. That's not.
Oh, Patrick. Mr. Baker.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking to me. Mr. Baker?
So what I'm saying is that my review, and part of that was conducted by Parker Poe and attorneys Mac McCarley and Anthony Fox, but my concern all along has been this rule, and I asked shortly after I got here, and hearing some of the issues coming out of the fire department, this reliance to Rule 9, the first thing that I asked is, okay, what's the source of authority of Rule 9? Tell me about Rule 9. And found out that it was a resolution that council had passed. And then I'm looking at your charter provision that vests exclusive authority in the fire chief and the police chief to manage the promotion process. And then I look at Rule 9, which has a series of directions and authority and responsibility provided to the HR director that seems to supersede what's in the charter. And again, it is sort of black letter municipal law that local ordinances won't supersede a state charter that's been provided by the General Assembly. So I initially saw a conflict here, and as there's hearing more and more about Rule 9, I asked Mr. Fox and Mr. McCarley to look at all the procedures that we have, given their experience with the city, to give me a clear understanding as to what some of the issues are, because I think in terms of trying to address some of the issues that are outstanding, the inability to identify or at least agree on a common set of facts and procedures or rules to the process, so to speak, has been a challenge. And that's what we're attempting to do here in this particular matter.
So we can understand if the fire department has been operating under a policy for the last 48 years, for decades or generations, how it would be prudent or fair to bring them to the table in negotiating how this policy should be written, instead of saying we can't do this anymore because it's unconstitutional, when they've been indoctrinated with this policy. So again, I think that we should listen to the employees, listen to those employees who are opposing it, to the employees that represent a certain constituency of the fire department. And again, if we can take this, defer it and take it to governance committee or defer it and let you all work through it with the union at the table and maybe come to a compromise or something. But I don't think it's fair to say, well, Rule 9 is wrong and we shouldn't have done this. So just, if they feel like we're saying, just deal with it. And then can you also explain the union, the firefighters union, please?
So and this dovetails nicely into the issue, because you mentioned something about negotiating. In North Carolina, the unions do not have collective bargaining power with local governments, and that's the issue. Although there may actually be a quote unquote union, it's not like the traditional union in terms of their ability to collectively bargain with the local government, and that is an issue here, because I want to be clear that we have made the policy, specifically the promotional policy that the fire department has put together. We have made that available to, I'm not sure what words you want to use, the union reps, for them to take a look at it and give us their input. But it's not a situation of collective bargaining type of input. It's simply, here's what we're proposing. Let us know if you have questions. They gave us questions and then we responded to them. So I don't want it to seem that just out of the blue, the new city attorney came in and just started changing everything up. There's been dialogue, and it's my understanding that they like the certainty that they think they have in Rule 9. But from my perspective and the perspective of our outside counsel, that's not the basis for the legal issue that we have here, which is that you have a rule that clearly impacts and effectively is in conflict with a charter provision, and that's really the issue that we're talking about here. There will be more discussion going forward about the various policies and procedures, and we want to be open and transparent with our workforce as we go, and we will continue that. But when you start off with this rule that's sitting out here, it's hard to do the rest of it while we've got a rule that is clearly in conflict with our charter sitting out there as an obstacle to addressing some of these other issues.
I think the city manager also wanted to address the question of how employees are represented and involved and engaged. Mr. Jones?
So thank you, Mayor and members of council. And I'm going to ask our HR director, Sheila, to come up and talk a little bit about what's transpired over the course of the past few months. I will say that the questions about Rule 9 existed before Patrick got to Charlotte. And one of the things that Patrick did do with all of the memos circulating, he called outside counsel to review it. We can go back a little bit in time. And there was this review of a bunch of policies that relate to the fire department. And much of that was handled by Management Partners, who has conducted several reviews of the fire department over the course of the years, maybe going back as far as 2015. One of the outstanding issues was Rule 9, which was given to the city attorney's office. You may recall that there was a confidential briefing. There were some instructions that occurred after that, which included to make sure that there were conversations with the union. While Patrick did outline what occurred in those discussions, I think it's important for Sheila to just talk a little bit about what is lost, not lost, with Rule 9 being repealed and replaced. And I believe we can get a little bit better level of comfort in that there were some discussions, but not me at the table, but the HR director, the police chief, the fire chief, and members of the bar union. So Sheila, could you just give us a little bit more in depth of those level of discussions, as well as what, if anything, are employees losing, gaining with this repeal of Rule 9, if that's fair?
Yes, sir. Yes, I can. So thank you, council.
All right.
Sorry, the microphone's on?
Is she on mute? She's on mute?
Mic up, Sheila.
No, it is. That's right. That's right.
Can you hear me now? I'm mic'd. I should be mic'd.
Thank you.
I think I'm on now. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Manager Jones. So I will reiterate something the manager just said and something that Attorney Baker said. This has been a very long and complex process because the issues are crossing several different administrative subjects. So the subject tonight is the legal subject. Tonight is about the authority of the rule, and that's the focus of the conversation tonight. I think the relevant factors that some of the council members have posed questions about is about the administration of the rule. So just in context, Rule 9 is a rule that was primarily written to ensure that when we have applicants for employment and candidates for promotion, that the processes that we utilize in both of those systems are based on merit and are not based on anything other than a person's merit and is not discriminatory. So Rule 9 is an anti-discrimination foundation. And so today, what we're really trying to do today is to make sure that the authority of the rule is in alignment with the charter. That's the focus of today. However, to the questions that have hit this room, the procedures that we have utilized over many years with promotions in both the fire department and in the police department have been compliant with standard operating practices of most organizations in any hiring or promotional process, and is not very different than what you'll find for any department in the city of Charlotte. What you will find in the actual promotion policy itself, is specifically referring to the fire department policy, is that for the rank of firefighter 2 and higher, those positions, most of them have an evaluation process called assessments. And at a minimum, the assessment is some type of oral interview. And then most often what you'll find for captain and battalion chief and division chief, you're going to have an interview and some type of assessment. For a captain or a battalion chief, it's going to be an interview panel. There will be a situation panel where you analyze a situation. And then also there's a written test. And so those three components are very consistent in both the police department and the fire department in terms of hiring. So I think some of the confusion is that some of the conversation appears to say that the fire chief or the police chief unilaterally is going around deciding who's going to take what job. By authority, both chiefs have the authority to make the final decision. That is true. That is written in the charter, just as Attorney Baker has stated. However, by process, we utilize panels, we utilize external panels. We utilize vendors to help with the assessment centers. We have vendors that score the written exams. We have those exam scores sent into the organization. The City of Charlotte has human resources staff that's both centralized and decentralized that have been engaged in these processes. From a centralized perspective, the people who sit in the office where my office is, over the past 2 years, I've had at least 6 to 7 people, different people, participate at some level in promotional processes in the fire department. In addition to that, we have a staff that's sitting inside the fire department, and we have about 2 or 3 people sitting there that participate in the process as well. So to answer Mr. Jones' question, what is not missing when you appeal tonight, when you repeal tonight? What's going to be retained is process. The process that we have instilled over the past few years will be retained, and that process is a very open, very well communicated process, and does have a lot of objective procedures built inside of it. And quite frankly, over the past couple of years, when the fire department has made changes to the process, before the change was implemented, the fire chief would meet with me and my staff and other folks on my staff to review those changes to see if I had any questions or recommendations, and we would discuss those, and those recommendations have been taken. So I think we have to separate out what the question is tonight. The question tonight is the legal question, and the administrative procedures are something that I can attest that we do, and HR is involved in, and from my assessment is a very legal process, and it is free of discrimination.
All right. I have Ms. Mayor, is Mr. Baker, Ms. Johnson, is that, did your questions get addressed?
Well, I think the concern with the employee group is that there won't be any oversight of the promotional process. And I understand that the chief has the final decision, but we receive correspondence from the firefighters routinely, often. We don't get that from CMPD. So I'm just asking, what is the problem, and and how do we address it? That's it. And this Rule 9 has been an item or an issue of contention. So the fact that there's no one from the firefighters group that can answer the questions, and they've not been able to speak with us, and maybe it's because they can't speak with city government. I guess that's what you're saying. And that's why I'm asking these questions. There's an issue. We all know there's an issue. And we keep hearing it. So that's all. I'm just trying to determine the bottom line, and that's it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think just looking at this thing really literally in terms of what we're being asked to do tonight, I hear what Ms. Johnson's saying, I hear what Ms. Simpson's saying, but what we're being asked to do tonight is make a technical correction to our ordinances, no matter when it was written. If we have our own city attorney and outside counsel telling us that they don't comply with state law, then I think let's clean up our books. Let's get that figured out and then have the conversation about the process, because I think that's fair. I think it, certainly I'm not going to get caught up on unions, and I'm a Yankee, proud Yankee, but I come from a union state, so I know the difference. But the bottom line is we have employees who want to be heard. I'd rather hear from the employees, with all due respect, not their hired representative. And so if there's a format that we can hear from them and discuss it in the governance committee or whatever, I'm open to that. I want to, there's where there's, okay, I was going to say where there's smoke, there's fire, but this is a bad example of that one. But but if there is, if there is a process that needs to be protected for the employees, or that has been a longstanding tradition that they feel works, then I'm all about talking about that and finding a process that worked. But for this action right here, I just don't see where we're helping ourselves when we have a number of legal opinions telling us that we have a ordinance on our books that does not comply with state law.
All right. Now we have Mr. Winston followed by Ms. Ajmira.
So I just want to level set us again just a little bit for colleagues and the public. I am as big of a union advocate as I think you're going to find on this council. But we have to recognize that we live in a right-to-work state, right? It is illegal for us as a municipality to enter into a collectively bargained agreement, right? So it ties our manager from having certain types of conversations that are allowed to be heard. That doesn't mean that unions cannot talk to us, right? They can talk to us in every public forum that we have, but they factually and legally cannot be at the table for negotiations of contracts, whether that be about purchases of goods, promotions, or hiring. So as I have tried to, one example that I have tried to set over this past couple of years that I've been on council is the recognition that us as representatives, given our structure of government locally and in the state, we have a responsibility to facilitate these policy discussions on behalf of those that belong to collective bargaining organizations. And then it is our job to facilitate conversations amongst each other, if we so desire, to turn those desires of our constituents, just as we would do with any other group that advocates for their folks. And it is our job to turn those into policy if we so choose. I think this is exactly the situation that we're in right now. I'd like to take a quick moment also to level set what we are hearing from these firefighters. I will say I have a little bit of, I'm a little closer to this. I grew up in a firehouse. I grew up with a black firefighter father, who was the captain now, who has been fighting some of these same issues. We're talking about systemic fairness issues in civil service. I was also a party to a class action lawsuit against the fire department of New York City, where we won to show that there are ingrained discriminatory practices in firefighting in New York City, but also around or just nationally. So I often get brought into the conversation when we're talking about police, and a lot of times that's the easy one to pick on, to be completely honest, because we see it all the time. But when we're talking about national standards and best practices of firefighting anywhere, you'll see that it is ingrained, in fact, in these areas of testing to get on the job and promotion. I guarantee you that those things exist. Just look at when Rule 9 was put in. So I do believe that we have a problem that needs to be addressed from our employees. I would suggest that this is long ingrained, and we are going to go way beyond national best practice standards, and we're really going to have to approach this from, again, I hate to be the broken record of removing policies and practices that were formed through the lens of white supremacy of the past, institutional white supremacy. I think that when we start to deconstruct this, we will see that's where we are. And the only way that we're going to be able to do this is if we, as Mayor Pro Tem said, clean up our books and then commit to a process that effectively gets to the necessary changes that are needed. And I suggest that we just do step one and commit ourselves to the however many steps are needed to get this right in the future. Thank you.
All questions.
Okay, I have Ms. Ajmira. Ms. Ajmira, your hand's up?
Yes.
Mr. Graham, I heard your motion, but Ms. Ajmira. Ms. Ajmira?
Yes. My question here is, for Mr. Baker. Mr. Baker, if the charter was changed to take ultimate authority from the fire chief on promotions, would that fix the conflict?
Mr. Baker, you're on mute.
You'd figure after nearly a year of this, I wouldn't do that. That really is all dependent upon the language that you actually use. Right now I'm sort of playing the hand that I've been dealt. But if you could go back to 1973, I would say that if the council at that time wanted to make changes to the process of promotions, it should have amended the charter at that time, and I would say that that's where you would need to go to avoid the legal issue that I presented to you, which is this issue of authority.
So that could potentially fix it.
It could.
Okay. Okay, that's all I have. The rest of my questions were addressed. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
All right, I have Mr. Graham who made a motion to call the questions. Someone seconded, but I wasn't sure who.
My hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll just take this opportunity, Madam Mayor. Our attorney has given us a recommendation. The outside counsel has given a recommendation. The HR director has eloquently stated what we're doing tonight. It seems like we're having one agenda item, but three separate conversations. So I think it's time for us to vote and move on.
Yeah, I've had my hand up, Madam.
I know, Mr. Newton, I'm not sure where you are on my screen anymore. I don't see Mr. Newton. That's why my apologies, Mr. Newton. I'm trying to find. Help me out here, guys.
Madam Mayor, we have a motion to call the question in a second. We need to vote on that without further ado. That's the way it works.
I understand that, Mr. Driggs, but you have to remember this is virtual, and people, I'm struggling here. I did not see Mr. Newton on the screen, and I just think that would be inappropriate for me not to do that. Mr. Newton, and then we'll go to the motion to close.
And I'll make this as quick as possible. So it's my understanding that Rule 9 is not an ordinance. I think you had said this, Patrick. It was a resolution, right?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay, so I mean, it has no real legal binding authority. If anything, it's just served as guidance. Now, mind you, it's something that we have put in policy for quite some time. I think that what Councilman Merritt had said, I think is really significant here because charters are ordinances are within the purview of city councils that in themselves can be changed. So if there is a conflict here, maybe what we're doing is we're looking at the wrong place to fix this problem. So instead of looking at that policy, we do need to be looking at our charter. And that's what raises the question for me, why we aren't looking at that. I mean, yes, we can go ahead and we can eliminate the policy, but yet that safety net that so many employees rely on to be treated equitably goes away, and we will be waiting thereafter for a procedure that we really have no plan to achieve, right? Not at this point. And that's what bothers me here. It'd be one thing if we were talking about maybe amending the charter and in so doing saying, this is our plan, this is the procedure we're going to implement to uphold, to not say we're going to try to uphold the spirit of Rule 9, but to actually uphold the spirit of Rule 9 and vote on that. That's why I think right now, for me, this all seems just a bit abstract in nature, and I feel like what we're doing is we're pulling the rug out from underneath employees that rely on Rule 9 without a real clear plan to move forward to support them. And the way we do that is we look at the charter and we say, how do we go about fixing our charter, not just eliminating Rule 9, and have a plan to do that we vote on. That's kind of where I'm at on this. And I just wanted to make those points.
Thank you, Mr. Newton. Now we have a motion to call for the question. I'm going to do a roll call vote. I don't see Ms. Watlington. Ms. Watlington, are you I need to see your screen for the roll call vote. All right, so Ms. Mayor Pro Tem?
Can you see me now?
Ms. Watlington's back.
I know, I don't know what happened here.
No, it was up. Go ahead, Ms. Watlington.
Yes, Watlington, yes.
Mayor Pro Tem,
Yes.
Ms. Ajmira,
No.
for calling the question? Wait a minute, let me make sure we're on the same page. There was a motion to call the question. Are you saying no?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was the vote, but yeah, yes for the questions.
All right. Councilmember Winston,
Yes.
Councilmember Bakari,
Yeah.
all right, Mr. Driggs,
Yes.
Mr. Eggleston,
Yes.
Mr. Graham,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
This is a vote for us not to ask any more questions on the subject.
this is to close the, yes, it is. I don't mean it not to ask any more questions. It's a motion to close, to call for the vote. The motion is to call for a vote.
Yes.
All right, Mr. Newton? I didn't hear you.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, now that we had the call for the question, this is the vote. And the motion was by Mr. Driggs, second by Mr. Bakari, to adopt a resolution to repeal Rule 9 to align the city administrative guidance regarding promotional processes with the City of Charlotte provisions for the Civil Service Board, and to clarify that adopted human resources policies, standards, and guidelines supersede any prior administrative versions. Ms. Watlington?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes.
Ms. Ajmira?
No.
Mr. Winston?
Mayor, before I say my vote, are you able to, in addition to, upon accepting, adopting of this resolution, able to send this issue to Budget and Effectiveness Committee so that we can kind of set it?
I have the ability to do that, but I will not make that contingent upon this vote. I don't want to make that contingent. So I just want to make sure that that's another issue. But yes, I do have the ability to do that. All right, Mr. Winston?
Yes.
Mr. Bakari?
Yes.
Mr. Driggs?
Yes.
Mr. Eggleston?
Yes.
Mr. Graham?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Can I clarify something? Yeah, of course I can.
Ms. Johnson, no, I think you have to vote. We've had a motion to close, to call for the vote.
But this was a very important legal question. I just thought that, I thought Councilmember Newton clarified that it wasn't illegal, but when we were told during the presentation that it was. But I thought Mr. Baker just now clarified that it was not actually illegal because it's a charter and not an ordinance. So if that's not an important factor for you all, that's fine. I'm voting no.
Did you, Mr. Baker, would you answer Ms. Johnson's question? She's already voted no, but we can address, you can send it to us. Okay. All right, Ms. Johnson is a no. Mr. Newton?
No.
All right. The motion passes. Thank you very much. Now, the next item is item 13, CLT Host 2020 Economic Development Challenge Grants. The first action is to accept a grant in an amount of $1 million from the CLT Host 2020 to assist with development and execution of a comprehensive branding strategy utilizing Meet Charlotte brands and materials. B, accept a grant in the amount of $300,000 from the same committee to reboot and grow the city's small business ecosystem. Finally, adopt a budget ordinance appropriating $1.3 million from the same committee to the Neighborhood Development Grants Fund.
Move to approve A, B, and C. Driggs.
All right, second?
Second.
Mr. Bakari, thank you very much. All right, is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, I'm going to begin the roll call vote. Councilmember Watlington? Yes. I'm sorry, was there a hand up anywhere?
No, I say yes.
All right, Ms. Watlington. Ms. Watlington, I need to see you to be.
I can see me.
I can't. Oh, there you are. Thank you very much. Your vote was yes? All right. Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes.
Ms. Ajmira?
Yes.
Mr. Winston?
Yes.
Mr. Bakari?
Yes.
Mr. Driggs,
Yes.
Mr. Eggleston,
Yes.
Mr. Graham,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Newton.
Yes.
Thank you. The next item is item number 14, to approve the developer agreements with Parkside at Hickory Grove, Karma Real Estate, Ashley Flats, and Toll Brothers for traffic signal modifications. B, adopt a budget ordinance appropriating $128,550 in these funds for traffic signal installations and improvements in the general capital projects fund. And C, adopt a budget ordinance appropriating $21,496 and supplemental development funds for traffic signal installation and improvements.
Move to
on
approve A,
projects
B,
under
and C.
construction.
Driggs?
Mr. Driggs?
Second.
Watlington.
There we go.
Ms. Watlington? Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion. Ms. Watlington?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yep.
Ms. Ajmira?
Yes.
Mr. Winston?
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Bakari?
Yes.
Mr. Driggs?
Yes.
Mr. Eggleston?
Yes.
Mr. Graham?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Newton?
Yes.
Thank you. Next item is 15, approve non-reimbursable development agreement with Kinger Homes for construction of Canfield Drive sanitary sewer extension. Adopt a budget ordinance appropriating $55,000 in private development funds for the same. Is there a motion?
Move to approve A and B. Driggs?
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Is
Hold on.
there any discussion? Seeing no hands raised, Councilmember Watlington,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem,
Yes.
Ms. Ajmira,
Yes.
Councilmember Winston,
Yes.
Councilmember Bakari,
Yes.
Councilmember Driggs,
Yes.
Councilmember Eggleston,
Yes.
Councilmember Graham,
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson,
Yes.
Councilmember Newton.
Yes.
Item 16 is the lease of city-owned property, adopting resolution for a 5-year lease between the city and Lee Wesley Group operating as Burger King for retail space at the Transit Center, authorizing the manager to negotiate and execute those documents to complete the transaction. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Driggs? A and B?
Do I have a second?
Eggleston.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? No hands being raised. Councilmember Watlington,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem,
Yes.
Councilmember Ajmira,
Yes.
Councilmember Winston,
Yes.
Councilmember Bakari, Councilmember Driggs,
Yes.
Councilmember Eggleston,
Yes.
Councilmember Graham,
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson,
Yes.
Councilmember Newton.
Yes.
Thank you. The next item is adopt a resolution and close the alleyway between East 22nd and East 23rd Street. Do I have a motion?
Motion to adopt.
Second. Driggs?
Thank you very much. Any discussion? Seeing no hands raised, Councilmember Watlington,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem,
Yep.
Councilmember Ajmira,
Yes.
Councilmember Winston,
Yes.
Councilmember Bakari,
Yes.
Councilmember Driggs,
Yes.
Councilmember Eggleston,
Yes.
Councilmember Graham,
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson,
Yes.
Councilmember Newton.
Yes.
Thank you. The second, item 18, adopt a resolution and close an alleyway between Lola Avenue and Berry Street. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Move.
Driggs?
Second. Eggleston.
All right. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion. Ms. Watlington,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem,
Yes.
Ms. Ajmira,
Yes.
Mr. Winston,
Yes.
Mr. Bakari,
Yes.
Mr. Driggs,
Yes.
Mr. Eggleston,
Yes.
Mr. Graham,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Newton. Mr. Newton?
Yes.
Thank you. Adopt a resolution and close Macy Street. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Driggs?
Second?
Eggleston.
Isel, yes.
All right. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion. Ms. Watlington,
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Isolt,
Yes.
Ms. Ajmira,
Yes.
Mr. Winston,
Yes.
Mr. Bakari,
Yes.
Mr. Driggs,
Yes.
Mr. Eggleston,
Yes.
Mr. Graham,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Newton.
I vote yes.
All right, thank you. Item 20, adopt a resolution and close the western right-of-way between Bullard Street and unopened Joy Street. Do I have a
Motion to
motion?
approve, Eggleston.
Second, Driggs.
All right, any discussion? Hearing no
Nope.
discussion.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Mr. Winston?
I could just use a box of unopened joy myself, like the closed street, but sorry. That's it. Thank you.
Get him off. Get him off.
Oh my God. I remember when there was Joy dishwashing liquid that came in a yellow bottle and plastic. It's just like.
No, just stop at joy. Just stop at joy.
A bottle of
Move to fill a second at-large seat.
So, all right. No further discussion needed or required. Ms. Watlington,
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Isolt,
Quickly, yes, before anything gets worse.
Ms. Ajmira,
Yes.
Mr. Winston,
Definitely.
Mr. Bakari,
Yes.
Mr. Driggs,
Yes.
Mr. Eggleston,
Yes.
Mr. Graham,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Newton.
Yes.
Motion to adjourn, Eggleston.
All right, I have a motion to
Second.
adjourn. Is there a second?
Second, Newton.
Absolutely.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Good night,
Aye.
everyone.
Bye, everyone.